Hey guys, tonight we begin with beauty standards so strict they could bruise your ribs, bleach your skin, and politely kill you while everyone applauds. You are stepping into Victorian England, where looking healthy means looking weak, and looking desirable means looking like you might faint at any moment. The air smells like perfume and fear. Fashion magazines read like medical advice, and medical advice reads like punishment. Beauty is not about pleasure here. It is about discipline, obedience, and proving you belong. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You arrive in Victorian England, and the first thing you notice is not the fog, not the brick, not even the smell of coal smoke politely pretending to be air. It is the way people look at you. Not directly, of course. That would be rude. They look past you, through you, and then quietly assess everything you failed to do correctly before leaving the house. Beauty here is not decoration. It is evidence. Proof that you are disciplined, respectable, and most importantly, not a problem. You learn this within minutes. Your posture gives you away first. Shoulders slightly forward, chin not quite lifted enough. Someone clears their throat nearby, the Victorian equivalent of an alarm bell. You straighten instinctively, because you understand immediately that slouching is not casual here. It is a confession, a moral failing with bad posture. In this world, the body is expected to behave. Beauty is the visible result of obedience. You walk past shop windows and see reflections that are less mirrors and more courtrooms. Waistlines are narrow on purpose. Faces are pale on purpose. Hair is arranged so precisely it looks like it has been negotiated into place. Nobody appears comfortable, which seems to be the point. Comfort suggests indulgence, and indulgence suggests weakness. Weakness, you will soon learn, is unattractive not because it is unpleasant, but because it is suspicious. People dress like their character is on trial. Fabric whispers status before anyone speaks. Cleanliness is not about hygiene so much as virtue. Dirt is not dirt. It is evidence of poor choices. You begin to realize that beauty here is less about being admired and more about being approved. Every ribbon, glove, and carefully buttoned collar exists to say, I belong. I know the rules. I am safe to trust. You notice how sickness is quietly romanticized. Looking slightly unwell is acceptable, even desirable. Pale skin suggests you are not laboring outdoors like someone who must work for a living. Dark circles hint at sensitivity, perhaps poetry, perhaps an unfortunate constitution. Actual health, the robust kind, is treated with suspicion. Too much color in the cheeks implies exertion. Exertion implies effort. Effort implies class confusion. Beauty manuals sit openly on tables, their titles gentle, their instructions ruthless. They do not ask what you want to look like. They tell you what you must look like if you expect to be taken seriously by anyone with influence. These books are written with the calm confidence of people who have never questioned whether ribs are optional. You are advised to refine yourself, to correct nature, to never allow your body to look as though it belongs entirely to you. You quickly understand that beauty is gendered, but control is universal. Women are expected to look fragile, as though a strong breeze might carry them off, but also structured, contained, and precise. Men are expected to look restrained, solid, unyielding. Emotional expression is frowned upon unless it arrives dressed as poetry or grief. Either way, it should be tasteful. You begin to see how beauty works like a language everyone pretends not to speak. A woman who dresses too boldly is improper. A woman who dresses too plainly is careless. A man who grooms too much is vain. A man who grooms too little is suspect. The rules shift constantly, but the consequences remain consistent. Get it wrong, and the room quietly rearranges itself to exclude you. What surprises you most is how early this starts. Children are shaped gently but firmly, trained into stillness and presentation before they can spell either word. You watch a young girl corrected for running too freely, for laughing too loudly, for existing with too much enthusiasm. She is not scolded harshly. That would be unseemly. She is guided, adjusted, reminded of who she is meant to become. Beauty is taught as responsibility. No one ever says this outright. That would be vulgar. Instead, it is implied everywhere, in glances, in advice, in the way admiration is granted conditionally. You understand that beauty here is a social contract. Fulfill your end, and you are rewarded with acceptance. Fail, and you are not punished directly. You are simply overlooked, which is worse. By the end of the day, you realize something unsettling. Beauty in Victorian England is not about pleasure or self-expression. It is about reassurance. Reassurance that the social order is intact, that people know their place, that bodies behave as expected. Looking beautiful means looking controlled, contained, and convincingly content with all of it. You catch your reflection again, adjusted posture and all, and understand the final rule. Beauty here is not meant to make you happy. It is meant to make everyone else comfortable. You learn very quickly that color is dangerous. Not bright color, not fashion color, but the kind that lives in your face when blood remembers it has somewhere to be. In Victorian England, looking alive is suspicious. It suggests movement, effort, possibly sunlight. Sunlight suggests labor, and labor suggests you belong to someone else's problem. So you learn to keep your skin pale, as though life itself has learned to whisper. Paleness here is not absence. It is performance. A careful balancing act between looking refined and looking like you might collapse gracefully onto a fainting couch at any moment. Too white and people worry you are actually dying. Too flushed and they worry you are enjoying yourself. The goal is a delicate, exhausted glow that says you are sensitive, cultured, and only barely surviving the emotional weight of existence. You notice how often illness is mentioned casually, almost fondly. A weak constitution is treated like a personality trait. Delicate nerves, a fragile chest, an unfortunate tendency toward faintness. These are not flaws. They are credentials. Proof that your body is not built for manual effort or vulgar resilience. Sickness becomes a way of proving you are above the physical world, floating just slightly above your own organs. Doctors reinforce this without irony. They nod gravely at pale skin and prescribe rest, restriction, and more restriction. Fresh air is recommended cautiously, preferably filtered through lace curtains. Food is discussed like a moral temptation. Too much appetite suggests animal instincts. A proper Victorian body eats sparingly and apologetically, as though digestion itself is a little embarrassing. You start to notice how fashion assists in this illusion. Dresses restrict breathing just enough to make lightheadedness plausible. Fabrics are chosen to emphasize thinness, not warmth. Sleeves and collars frame the neck and wrists to highlight how little blood seems to reach them. Even men participate, cultivating a reserved, slightly drained appearance that suggests they are burdened by intellect rather than muscles. Cosmetics quietly pick up the slack. Powders lighten skin further, muting any inconvenient signs of circulation. A touch of blue pencil beneath the eyes can suggest depth, sensitivity, a soul weighed down by poetry. Nobody calls this makeup. That would be improper. It is enhancement, correction, refinement. The goal is to look as though you naturally exist on the brink of exhaustion. You begin to understand that vitality is vulgar. A healthy glow belongs to farm girls, factory workers, and people who sweat. You are meant to look untouched by exertion, as though the hardest thing you have done all day is feel too much. Pale skin becomes shorthand for gentility, proof that your life is conducted indoors among ideas, not outdoors among consequences. There is a strange comfort in this. If you look ill enough, expectations soften. You are forgiven for weakness, spared certain duties, treated gently. Sickness becomes armor. Not enough to truly stop life, but enough to shape it. A well-timed faint can end an awkward conversation. A persistent cough can excuse you from responsibilities you were never meant to shoulder anyway. But there is a cost, and you feel it in the quiet moments, in the way your body learns to associate strength with shame, in the way hunger becomes something to hide, in the way deep breaths feel rebellious. You start to perform frailty even when you do not feel it, because appearing capable invites demands. Children absorb this lesson early. You see girls praised for looking wan, boys admired for their thoughtful pallor. Anyone too energetic is gently corrected. Calm down, sit still. You look overheated. Even youth must practice restraint, especially youth. You hear people speak fondly of friends who are often unwell. She has such a delicate nature. He suffers from nerves. These phrases are delivered with affection, even admiration. The sick are interesting, the healthy are forgettable. Robustness suggests a lack of imagination. And then there are the truly ill, the ones whose bodies take the performance too seriously. Their symptoms are downplayed, romanticized, reframed as unfortunate elegance. Real suffering is inconvenient. It ruins the illusion. So it is softened with language until it sounds almost beautiful. You catch yourself checking your reflection again, watching the color drain back after exertion, feeling relief when it does. Pale enough, acceptable. You understand now that looking alive is risky, but looking slightly unwell is ideal. Because in this world, sickness does not mean failure, it means refinement. You step into the corset and immediately understand that this is not clothing, it is architecture. Someone pulls the laces with professional calm, the way a sailor tightens rope or a priest closes a door. Your ribs respond with confusion, then concern. The corset does not care. It is not cruel. It is purposeful. Beauty, you learn, begins when your body accepts that expansion is optional. Breathing becomes a negotiated activity. Shallow is polite. Deep is excessive. Each inhale is measured. Each exhale controlled, like you are rationing air for a long winter. You realize very quickly that the goal is not to stop breathing, just to remind your lungs who is in charge. The silhouette must be maintained at all costs, including comfort, digestion, and the radical idea of bending. You are told this will improve your posture. It does, in the same way a wall improves your ability to stand upright. Your spine aligns because it has no alternative. Shoulders roll back. Chest lifts, though not too much. The corset encourages a shape that looks effortless while requiring constant effort to remain alive inside it. You are advised not to fidget. Fidgeting suggests impatience. Impatience suggests temperament. Temperament is unbecoming. Walking becomes an exercise in restraint. You take smaller steps. You turn carefully. Sitting requires strategy. You cannot collapse into a chair. You must lower yourself gracefully, like a fragile object being shelved. Every movement is deliberate. Beauty here is stillness with good manners. People assure you this is normal. Women have worn corsets for generations, they say, as if generations of discomfort have somehow turned it into a virtue. You are told it supports the body, that it trains you, that it helps you hold yourself properly. No one mentions that your internal organs are quietly renegotiating their lease. There is a strange pride in enduring it. Complaining would be worse than pain. Complaining implies weakness without refinement. Endurance, however, is admired. You notice how women speak of tight lacing the way soldiers speak of campaigns, with a mix of nostalgia, humor, and carefully concealed damage. Laughter becomes softer, controlled, because laughing too freely requires air. Men notice the result without acknowledging the process. They admire the narrow waist, the lifted posture, the composed stillness. They speak of delicacy as though it appears naturally, like dew. The machinery beneath the dress remains invisible, which is exactly the point. Beauty should never look like work, especially when it is. Doctors weigh in, as they often do, with alarming confidence. Some recommend corsets for support, for alignment, for proper female form. Others caution against excess but never question the premise. The problem is never the corset. The problem is how tightly you choose to obey it. Young girls are introduced early, gently at first, a little structure, a little guidance, nothing extreme. Their bodies learn the language of compression before they learn the language of choice. Growing becomes something to manage, to restrain, to apologize for. Expansion is framed as a temporary inconvenience on the path to proper shape. You discover that fainting is not an accident. It is an accepted side effect. A woman who swoons is not clumsy. She is delicate. She is overwhelmed by feeling, by heat, by the sheer weight of existence. A faint draws attention without demanding explanation. It is the body speaking politely when words would be inappropriate. At social gatherings, you watch women glide rather than move. They perch on chairs, lean lightly, hold themselves as if gravity is optional. Eating is minimal, performed carefully, because food expands things. Things must not expand. You learn to take small bites, chew discreetly, and smile through the pressure blooming under your ribs. There are moments when the corset fades into the background, when your body adapts and you forget the constant constraint. That, you realize, is its greatest success. Beauty becomes something you feel only when it is threatened. A deep breath, a sudden laugh, a moment of carelessness that reminds you the structure is still there, waiting. At night, when the laces are finally loosened, your lungs flood greedily with air. The relief is immediate and unsettling. You feel larger, softer, less contained. For a brief moment, you exist without permission. Then you remember how you are meant to look, and tomorrow, you will lace yourself back into place. You discover very quickly that there is no single ideal female silhouette, only a sliding scale of acceptable shapes determined by who you are, how old you are, and whether anyone plans to marry you soon. Beauty in Victorian England is not one body type. It is a contract that keeps being revised without telling you. If you are young and unmarried, the ideal shape is narrow, almost unfinished. A small waist is essential, but so is the suggestion that you might disappear if someone exhales too close to you. You are meant to look delicate, impressionable, and slightly unaware of your own body. Curves exist only as a promise, not a fact. Too much shape suggests experience, and experience is deeply suspicious in someone who is supposed to be waiting. You learn that innocence has a silhouette. It is upright, restrained, and modestly underdeveloped. Dresses are designed to emphasize a tiny waist while smoothing everything else into polite ambiguity. Your body should suggest potential, not confidence. You are allowed to exist, but only halfway. Once marriage enters the conversation, the rules shift. Now curves become useful. A fuller bust and hips signal fertility, stability, and a reassuring ability to produce heirs without fainting permanently. The corset changes shape accordingly, redistributing emphasis like a stage manager adjusting the spotlight. You are no longer required to look fragile. You are required to look capable, but not ambitious. For married women, the ideal silhouette says comfort without indulgence. You must look established, respectable, and pleasantly contained. Too thin implies illness or neglect. Too full implies excess. Your body is expected to settle into a shape that suggests domestic order. You are meant to look like someone who belongs in a well-managed home, not someone who needs rescuing or supervision. Age complicates everything. Youth allows exaggeration. A young woman can be narrow to the point of concern and still be admired. An older woman must soften, but only slightly. Too much softness is interpreted as carelessness. Too little suggests desperation. You are expected to age gracefully, which is Victorian shorthand for pretending nothing is happening while adjusting everything. Class changes the rules entirely. Upper-class women aim for fragility because they can afford it. Their bodies are not required to function efficiently. Delicacy proves they do not labor. Working-class women, however, must balance beauty with survival. Their silhouettes are allowed to be sturdier, but not sloppy. Strength is acceptable as long as it does not look proud. You notice that fashion plates rarely include women who actually work. The ideal shapes exist in a vacuum where no one lifts anything heavier than a teacup. Corsets and dresses are designed for stillness, not movement. The message is subtle, but consistent. Beauty belongs to those who do not need their bodies for anything practical. Motherhood redraws the map again. Once children arrive, expectations soften outwardly, but tighten internally. A mother should look warm, nurturing, and composed. Her body is allowed to show signs of use, but only tasteful ones. Stretch marks are never mentioned. Fatigue is acknowledged politely and then ignored. The silhouette of motherhood is one of controlled sacrifice. You realize that none of these shapes are permanent. They are costumes you move through as your social role changes. The same body is reshaped repeatedly to signal new information to the world who you are becoming. What you are worth, what you are expected to give. Men pretend not to notice these distinctions, which is impressive given how much effort goes into advertising them. They speak vaguely of preference while responding very specifically to each version. Society insists these ideals are natural, even as it spends enormous energy enforcing them. There is humor in how precise it all is. A waist an inch too wide suggests neglect. A figure too youthful suggests vanity. A shape too maternal suggests you have let yourself go. The margins for error are narrow, and the penalties are social rather than physical, which somehow makes them more effective. You begin to understand that the ideal silhouette is less about attraction and more about reassurance. Each shape exists to calm someone else's anxieties. Youth reassures men that innocence still exists. Curves reassure families that lineage will continue. Respectable fullness reassures society that order has been maintained. Your body becomes a message board you did not consent to manage. Standing in front of the mirror, adjusted and arranged according to whatever role currently applies to you, you realize something quietly unsettling. The ideal silhouette is never meant to fit comfortably. It is meant to fit expectations. You learn very quickly that weight is not discussed as flesh or bone or biology. It is discussed as character. People do not ask how you feel. They ask how you look, and then quietly decide what kind of person you must be based on how much of you exists. In Victorian England, the body is not a medical condition. It is a moral report card. Thinness is praised as restraint. It suggests self-control, refinement, and the ability to say no to yourself, which is considered the highest form of virtue. A small appetite is admired the way patience or humility might be. Eating lightly becomes a social performance, one where enthusiasm is suspicious and hunger is something to manage privately, like a bad thought. You notice how often people comment on portions without ever mentioning food. She eats so little, they say, approvingly. He has such moderation. These are compliments. No one asks if you are nourished. Nourishment is beside the point. Discipline is the goal. Hunger, you learn, is simply desire that has not yet been corrected. Meals are structured rituals. You are expected to eat slowly, carefully, and never with urgency. Hunger must never appear desperate. If you finish too quickly, you are indulging. If you take seconds, you are careless. The ideal eater appears vaguely uninterested, as though food is an inconvenience politely tolerated. Doctors reinforce this with alarming enthusiasm. They warn against excess, as if calories are a moral hazard. Rich foods are blamed for weak nerves, bad tempers, and general moral decay. Appetite becomes something to suppress, especially in women. A woman who eats heartily is assumed to lack delicacy. A man who eats excessively is assumed to lack discipline. Either way, weight gain is framed as failure. You begin to understand that fat is not seen as tissue. It is seen as evidence. Evidence that someone has given in, given up, allowed comfort to overtake propriety. People speak of weight the way they speak of vice, quietly, judgmentally, and always about someone else. Fashion does not help. Clothes are designed to disguise any deviation from the approved outline. Padding can be added in the right places, removed in others, but the waist must remain narrow. The illusion of thinness matters more than the reality. If your body insists on existing beyond its assigned space, it must be corrected or concealed. Hunger is reframed as strength. Feeling empty is treated like a badge of honor. You hear women joke about skipping meals, about tight lacing making food unnecessary, about faintness as if it is a charming inconvenience. The body protesting is not a warning, it is a sign that the system is working. You start to feel proud when you ignore hunger. There is a strange satisfaction in mastering it, in proving that your needs do not control you. You tell yourself this is maturity, refinement. You stop thinking of food as fuel and start thinking of it as temptation. Working class bodies are judged differently, though not more kindly. A sturdier frame is tolerated if it looks useful. Strength is allowed when it serves labor. But even then, excess is frowned upon. Too much softness suggests laziness. Too much appetite suggests a lack of planning. Everyone is expected to manage their body responsibly, according to their station. Children are not spared. Girls are encouraged to eat lightly from an early age. Boys are praised for restraint. Hunger is treated as something to outgrow, like childish impatience. You watch young people learn to distrust their own signals, to second-guess their needs before anyone else has to. There is humor in how seriously this is taken. Entire moral judgments are made over teacups and crumbs. A person's worth can shift based on how they hold a fork. Society insists this is about health, while quietly celebrating practices that make people weak, dizzy, and unwell. You begin to realize that the fear is not fat itself. It is excess. Excess of pleasure, excess of want, excess of presence. Weight becomes a stand-in for all the ways a person might take up too much space, physically or otherwise. Standing at a table, pushing food around your plate until it looks politely touched, you feel the strange victory of restraint. Compliments follow. You are told you have such control. Your stomach disagrees. But in Victorian England, discipline matters more than comfort. Hunger is no longer a signal, it is a test. You begin to understand that hair is not just hair. It is biography, reputation, and moral resume woven together and worn on your head. In Victorian England, hair speaks before you do, and it is expected to say the right things without hesitation. Long hair is the first requirement. Length signals patience, discipline, and virtue. It proves you have stayed still long enough for something to grow without interruption. A woman with long hair is assumed to be gentle, controlled, and properly supervised by society itself. Cutting it short, without a socially acceptable reason, is treated less like a style choice and more like a personal confession delivered far too loudly. Hair is meant to be abundant, but restrained. Thick, glossy locks are admired, but only when arranged modestly. Loose hair is intimate, almost indecent, reserved for bedrooms, illness, or dramatic literature. In public, hair must be pinned, braided, coiled, or otherwise reminded that freedom is contextual. You notice how much time is spent managing it. Brushes glide through strands with ceremonial care. Oils are applied sparingly. Scalp health is discussed with the seriousness of land ownership. Hair is nurtured not for pleasure, but for presentation. A woman's hair is one of her most valuable visible assets, and it must be protected accordingly. Virtue is braided into it quite literally. Young unmarried women wear their hair in softer styles, signaling youth and availability, though availability must never look intentional. Married women adopt more severe arrangements, hair pulled back firmly as if to announce that frivolity has been retired. Age tightens styles further. Hairlines recede under hats and pins, quietly managed and never acknowledged. Men participate differently but no less deliberately. Hair should be neat, controlled, and respectable. Too long suggests eccentricity. Too styled suggests vanity. Facial hair becomes its own moral statement, carefully groomed to suggest authority without indulgence. A beard can signal wisdom or rebellion, depending entirely on how politely it is trimmed. You also learn that hair color matters. Dark hair carries associations of seriousness and depth. Blonde hair suggests youth and softness, sometimes innocence. Red hair is treated cautiously, admired in art and distrusted in life. People pretend these associations are natural while reacting to them with alarming consistency. Then there is the problem of cooperation. Hair does not always behave. It frizzes. It thins. It refuses to shine no matter how much oil you negotiate with it. When this happens, the blame falls quietly on you. Poor hair suggests poor habits, stress, improper care, a lack of discipline. No one considers that bodies vary. Variation is inconvenient. Women whose hair thins or falls out face particular scrutiny. Hair loss is not treated as a medical issue, but as a loss of femininity itself. Wigs and hairpieces step in discreetly, never acknowledged, always maintained. Pretending nothing is wrong becomes part of the ritual. Illness complicates things. Fever dulls shine. Long sickness can thin hair noticeably. In these cases, sympathy is extended, but only briefly. Prolonged imperfection becomes uncomfortable. Hair must recover on schedule or be hidden creatively. Children absorb these rules early. Girls are taught to sit still while their hair is brushed into compliance. Complaints are discouraged. Beauty requires endurance. Boys learn to keep hair neat, clean, and forgettable. Attention should never linger on a man's hair for too long. You start to see hair as labor. Hours of brushing, pinning, curling, braiding, and restraining go into creating an appearance of effortless virtue. Compliments follow. Your hair looks lovely today. What they mean is, you have succeeded at appearing acceptable. There is humor in how seriously this is taken. Entire judgments are made over stray curls. A single loose strand can shift an impression. A hat removed at the wrong moment reveals more than intended. Hair becomes a quiet anxiety, always present, always monitored. When your hair refuses to cooperate, when it falls flat or rebels against pins, you feel the social pressure tighten. You are not just having a bad hair day. You are failing to perform stability. Standing in front of the mirror, hands tired from arranging yourself into respectability, you realize the truth. In Victorian England, hair is not meant to express who you are. It is meant to reassure everyone else that you are under control. You confront skin care and quickly realize that Victorian England treats the face like a battlefield where science has not yet arrived, but confidence has. The goal is clear skin, luminous skin, virtuous skin. The methods are experimental at best and quietly lethal at worst. No one seems concerned. Beauty, after all, has always required a little faith. You begin with washing, which is not the soothing ritual it will one day become. Water is used cautiously. Too much washing is believed to weaken the skin, opening it up to drafts, illness, and moral decay. Soap exists, but it is harsh and often avoided. Instead, the face is dabbed, wiped, and politely negotiated with. Dirt is offensive, but cleanliness must never look excessive. Then come the products. Creams, salves, lotions, and powders arrive in elegant jars with reassuring labels and absolutely no ingredient lists. You are expected to trust them. These mixtures promise smoothness, brightness, and refinement. Some smell floral. Others smell faintly medicinal. A few smell like something you should not put on your face, which only adds to their credibility. Powder is essential. It mattifies shine, lightens the complexion, and gives the face that coveted porcelain finish. You apply it carefully, blending until your skin looks less like skin and more like a very polite statue. Some powders work beautifully. Others leave a faint, unsettling glow that catches the light just wrong. You pretend not to notice. Arsenic makes a discreet appearance in several products, though no one calls it that out loud. It is referred to as a complexion aid, a purifier, a tonic. It promises clear skin and bright eyes. And for a while, it delivers. Pallor deepens, blemishes fade. You look fragile in exactly the right way. Compliments follow. The side effects are less discussed. Tingling, irritation, occasional nausea. These are framed as signs the product is working. Beauty, like virtue, often requires discomfort. If your skin burns slightly, that is simply the impurities leaving. You learn that freckles are a problem. Sun exposure causes them, and sun exposure implies activity. Activity implies effort. Effort implies class confusion. So, freckles must be erased. Lemon juice is suggested. Vinegar. Various acids applied with optimistic determination. The stinging is unpleasant, but brief. The expectation of perfection lasts much longer. Scars are hidden at all costs. Pockmarks from childhood illness are softened with creams that promise miracles. Some work. Some simply rearrange the damage. You learn to angle your face in candlelight, so shadows do the rest. Lighting becomes part of your routine. The face you present is always designed with ambiance in mind. Men are not exempt, though their routines are discussed in lower tones. A man must look clean, composed, and unblemished, but never as though he tried too hard. Shaving products strip skin raw in the name of respectability. Aftershaves sting heroically. Irritation is tolerated. Vanity is not. You notice how much faith is placed in advice columns and beauty manuals. These books speak with authority, offering recipes that sound more like spells than skincare. Egg whites, mercury compounds, chalk, rose water. Each ingredient is chosen with confidence and very little testing. If it worked for someone else, it will work for you, or at least that is the theory. Skin is expected to be uniform, unchanging, and obedient. Any sign of oiliness is corrected aggressively. Dryness is softened cautiously. Aging is ignored as long as possible. Wrinkles are treated as personal failures rather than time doing what time does best. You begin to understand that skincare here is not about health. It is about appearance, holding steady under scrutiny. A flawless face suggests a flawless life, or at least a well-managed one. Imperfections invite questions. Questions invite judgment. There is humor in how casually dangerous all of this is. People cheerfully poison themselves in the name of refinement, trusting that moderation will save them. Just a little powder, just a touch of cream, nothing excessive. Excess, after all, is the real danger. Standing before the mirror, skin dulled into fashionable pallor, you catch that faint, wrong glow again. You tilt your head, adjust the light. It looks fine. It must be fine. Because in Victorian England, if beauty looks convincing enough, the cost becomes irrelevant. You learn very quickly that cosmetics exist in a strange double life. They are everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Every face you see has been adjusted, corrected, softened, or enhanced in some way. Yet no one admits to participating. Makeup in Victorian England is both essential and deeply embarrassing, like having feet but pretending you float. Publicly, cosmetics are frowned upon. A respectable woman is expected to look naturally beautiful, as though her face simply arranged itself out of good character. Paint is associated with actresses, courtesans, and women who earn their living by being looked at too closely. To admit to wearing makeup is to risk being mistaken for someone with intentions. Privately, however, cosmetics are not optional. They are used daily, carefully, and with remarkable precision. Powders even out skin tone. Rouge restores color that fashion has otherwise drained away. Eyebrows are subtly darkened. Lips are tinted just enough to suggest health without implying enthusiasm. The goal is invisibility. Makeup should never be seen. It should only be felt in the way people respond to you. You watch women apply it in dressing rooms with doors firmly closed. Conversations drop to whispers. Jars are tucked away quickly if someone enters unexpectedly. The ritual is practiced, efficient, and quietly anxious. Too much is disastrous. Too little is risky. The perfect face looks untouched, which requires considerable touching. Rouge is particularly dangerous. A little color suggests vitality. Too much suggests vanity, or worse, enjoyment. You learn to pinch cheeks instead, letting blood do the work temporarily. It hurts, but it is morally safer. Some women rely on this method entirely, timing their pinches carefully before entering a room, like performers preparing for a cue. Lip color follows similar rules. Pale lips can look ill. Colored lips can look bold. The solution is a faint stain applied sparingly and then blotted aggressively, as though apologizing for existing. You are not meant to look alluring. You are meant to look acceptable. Men pretend cosmetics do not exist at all. They praise fresh faces while responding enthusiastically to the results of careful application. They speak approvingly of women who need no paint, conveniently overlooking the powder settling into candlelight shadows and the subtle tint that keeps everyone looking awake. Advice manuals insist that true beauty requires no artificial help, then immediately provide instructions for homemade cosmetics that do not count as artificial. Natural ingredients are the loophole: beet juice, rose petals, burnt cloves. If it comes from the earth, it is virtuous. If it comes from a shop, it is suspect. Either way, it ends up on your face. Women become experts in denial. Compliments are deflected. You look lovely today. Oh, I slept well. You seem so bright. It must be the air. The lie is mutual and understood. Everyone agrees to pretend effort does not exist, which allows the system to continue without awkward questions. You begin to see cosmetics as a kind of social glue. They smooth over exhaustion, illness, and dissatisfaction. They help faces perform contentment even when the person underneath feels anything but. Makeup becomes emotional, labor made visible only when it fails. There is humor in the elaborate secrecy. Entire industries thrive while pretending they do not. Jars are labeled discreetly. Colors are named after flowers and virtues rather than body parts. Everything about cosmetics is designed to suggest that they are barely there. Actresses, of course, are exempt in the opposite direction. Their visible makeup is tolerated because it is expected. Their beauty is acknowledged as performance, which makes it safer. Respectable women must look beautiful without appearing to try. Performers are allowed to try because no one confuses them with wives. You notice how quickly judgment arrives when the illusion slips. A shiny forehead is noticed. Uneven color invites comment. Too much emphasis on the eyes raises eyebrows, figuratively and literally. The punishment is not dramatic. It is a shift in tone, a cooling of interest, a reminder that you have crossed an invisible line. Standing before the mirror, powder puff in hand, you hesitate. You know what is expected. You know what must not be acknowledged. You apply just enough to disappear into approval. Then you put the jar away, Smooth your face into polite neutrality and step out as though nothing has been done. Because in Victorian England, cosmetics are not about changing how you look, they are about pretending you never needed help at all. You learn that beauty in Victorian England is not only worn, it is measured, sometimes literally. Inches matter, fractions of inches matter, and the smaller the number, the louder the approval. Feet are the first giveaway. Tiny feet are admired with a reverence that borders on obsession. Shoes are narrow, stiff, and utterly unforgiving. A small foot suggests refinement, delicacy, and a life lived above the ground rather than on it. You are not meant to walk far or fast. You are meant to glide short distances between acceptable locations. Large feet are treated like an unfortunate personality trait. They are never mentioned directly. Instead, compliments avoid the subject entirely. Shoes are chosen carefully to disguise length, to compress width, to convince the eye that reality has been slightly exaggerated. Foot pain becomes a background condition, like weather, always present, never addressed. Hands come next. Slender fingers, narrow palms, and visible knuckles are ideal. Hands reveal class immediately. Soft hands suggest leisure. Rough hands tell stories no one wants to hear. Gloves exist to correct this problem, smoothing over evidence of labor, hiding imperfections, and adding a layer of polite distance between you and the world. You learn how to hold your hands properly, fingers relaxed but controlled, never clenched, never splayed. Hands should appear decorative rather than functional. They are for holding teacups, fans, and letters, not for gripping or gesturing wildly. Excess movement suggests passion. Passion suggests chaos. Gestures themselves are carefully regulated. Everything must be small. A nod instead of a bow. A slight tilt of the head instead of a turn. Even laughter is expected to stay within bounds. Broad gestures take up space, and taking up space is dangerous if you are not entitled to it. You notice how much effort goes into minimizing presence. People fold inward, arms stay close to the body, elbows behave, bodies learn to exist compactly, like furniture arranged to make a room feel larger. The goal is not invisibility, but containment. Advice manuals outline this with alarming specificity. How to sit without spreading skirts too widely. How to rise without shifting weight too obviously. How to accept an object without reaching for it. Everything is choreographed. You are not moving through space. You are negotiating it. Men are taught their own version of this restraint. Their gestures should be controlled, economical, and purposeful. Too much animation suggests lack of seriousness. Too little suggests coldness. Even masculinity is measured in moderation. Children absorb these rules early. You see young girls corrected gently when their movements become too free. Sit properly. Hands in your lap. Do not fidget. Boys are instructed to stand straight, to keep their limbs in check. The body learns discipline before the mind understands why. There is humor in how extreme this becomes. Entire social judgments are made based on how someone crosses a room. A woman who walks too quickly is assumed to be anxious. A man who gestures too broadly is assumed to be unreliable. Everyone becomes an amateur physiognomist, reading character in wrists and ankles. Dance offers a controlled release. Here, movement is allowed, but only within strict patterns. Steps are rehearsed, gestures prescribed. Grace is permitted because it follows rules. Improvisation is discouraged. Beauty must remain predictable. You begin to notice how exhausting this is. Every movement requires awareness. Every shift of weight is monitored. Even when alone, your body remembers the rules. You sit smaller, move quieter, take up less room without thinking. And yet, there is a strange satisfaction when you get it right, when your movements are praised as elegant, when someone remarks on your dainty hands or refined manner. These compliments land because they confirm you are succeeding at something invisible but vital. Standing in a crowded room, Holding yourself carefully within the approved dimensions, you realize something unsettling. Beauty here is not about how you look when still. It is about how little you disturb the space around you when you move. You discover that posture is not a suggestion here. It is prophecy. The way you hold yourself announces your future long before you open your mouth. In Victorian England, a straight spine is not about health or comfort. It is about promise. Slouching is treated as a warning sign, like smoke before a fire, quietly suggesting everything that might go wrong with you if left unchecked. From the moment you enter a room, your back is speaking on your behalf. Shoulders back means confidence, discipline, reliability. Chin lifted but not defiant means self-respect without arrogance. Every angle of your body delivers a message, and society is fluent in reading it. You realize quickly that posture is less about bones and more about obedience. Children are trained relentlessly. Sit up straight. Stand properly. Do not lean. Do not sprawl. Furniture is chosen to enforce this. Chairs designed to discourage comfort and reward stillness. Desks demand attention. Beds even seem to expect restraint. The body is never allowed to forget it is being watched, even when alone. You notice how often adults correct posture without thinking. A hand lightly presses between shoulder blades. A quiet cough signals disapproval. Advice is offered constantly, framed as concern. You will ruin your figure. You will damage your health. What they mean is you will damage your prospects. Posture is linked to class with remarkable precision. The upper classes stand as though supported by invisible strings. Their stillness reads as confidence because it is learned early and reinforced often. The working classes, bent by labor and necessity, are judged harshly for bodies shaped by survival. A curved back becomes shorthand for a limited future. Women are scrutinized most closely. A straight posture lifts the chest, narrows the waist, and presents the body correctly. Slouching ruins, lines, invites gossip, and suggests a lack of discipline. A woman who carries herself poorly is assumed to manage everything else poorly too. Housekeeping, child-rearing, morality, all apparently stored in the spine. Men are not exempt. A man who slouches looks weak, indecisive, or lazy. Military posture is admired even outside military life. Standing tall implies authority. A drooping stance implies failure to command oneself, let alone others. Corsets and braces assist with this, enforcing alignment whether you want it or not. They train muscles through repetition and discomfort. Over time, your body learns the shape expected of it. Straightness becomes habit. Slouching feels wrong, almost shameful, like speaking out of turn. You begin to understand how posture influences opportunity. Teachers favor upright students. Employers trust those who stand confidently. Suitors notice carriage before conversation. Even strangers respond differently depending on how you hold yourself. Your spine becomes a resume. There is humor in how exaggerated this becomes. Entire lectures are delivered about the dangers of poor posture. Doctors warn that slouching leads to illness, moral weakness, and a general slide into ruin. No one questions this logic. It feels obvious. If you cannot hold yourself upright, what else are you failing to hold together? You catch yourself adjusting constantly, straightening when you walk, sitting perched rather than relaxed, standing even when your feet ache because sitting improperly feels worse than pain. Your body learns vigilance. Over time, posture becomes identity. You no longer correct yourself consciously. You simply exist within the approved alignment. You look composed even when you are tired. You appear confident even when you are uncertain. The performance becomes automatic. And then you see someone slouch, just a little. Their shoulders droop. Their head tilts forward. The room responds subtly. Interest cools. Authority diminishes. Nothing dramatic happens, but something closes quietly. You realize then why posture matters so much here. In Victorian England, Standing straight is not about looking good. It is about convincing the world you deserve what comes next. You step into the world of men's beauty standards, expecting relief, maybe even freedom, and instead find a different cage built from ironed fabric and emotional restraint. Here, beauty is not discussed openly, because discussing it would imply concern, and concern would imply vanity. But the rules are just as strict, just quieter, enforced through silence rather than powder. A respectable man is meant to look severe, not cruel, not unkind, just firm, as though smiling too much might weaken the foundations of the empire. His face should be composed, his expression controlled, his emotions filed down to a manageable edge. Youthful softness is tolerated briefly, then trained out. Maturity arrives wearing stiffness like a badge. Hair is kept short, neat, and obedient. No curls spilling into personality, no wildness suggesting imagination. Every strand is expected to know its place. Hair oil is used sparingly, enough to signal care, never enough to suggest enjoyment. The ideal head looks maintained but uninterested in being admired. Clothing does most of the work. Dark colors dominate, absorbing attention rather than attracting it. Lines are straight, shoulders squared, everything built to project solidity. A well-dressed man should resemble architecture, stable, predictable, not decorative. Fashion exists, but only within narrow margins. Too much style suggests frivolity. Too little suggests neglect. The balance is delicate and closely watched. The body underneath must remain controlled. A man should appear capable but not indulgent. Strength is admired when it looks effortless. Muscles earned through labor or sport are acceptable. Muscles displayed for their own sake are suspicious. The ideal male body suggests readiness, not pleasure. Movement is restrained. Gestures are minimal and purposeful. Hands are used sparingly, never flailing, never lingering. A man who talks with his whole body is assumed to lack discipline. Stillness is authority. Silence is power. Taking up space is allowed only if it looks intentional. Facial hair becomes a careful negotiation. A beard can suggest wisdom or rebellion depending entirely on how carefully it is trimmed. Whiskers must look deliberate, never lazy. Shaving is its own ritual, blades scraping skin raw in the name of respectability. Cuts are tolerated. They prove seriousness. Scent is controlled too. A man may smell clean, faintly soapy, perhaps lightly cologned. Strong fragrance is frowned upon. It suggests artifice, or worse, desire. Desire is dangerous. Desire leads to mistakes, and mistakes leave marks on reputations. Age reshapes expectations. Young men are allowed a little softness, a little uncertainty. Older men must harden visibly. Lines on the face become assets. Gray hair signals authority. Any attempt to appear youthful is quietly mocked. A man must wear time proudly, even when it weighs him down. Class sharpens everything. Upper-class men aim for an appearance of effortless dominance. Their restraint reads as confidence because their position cushions it. Working-class men are judged more harshly. Their bodies are expected to show strength without coarseness, endurance without complaint. Any deviation is noticed. You realize how much effort goes into making it look like no effort at all. The pressed shirt, the polished boots, the controlled voice. All of it communicates reliability. Men are expected to look like they could handle anything, even if they never will. Emotion is managed carefully. Too much feeling shows weakness. Too little shows cruelty. The acceptable range is narrow and constantly shifting. A man must appear steady, even when nothing inside him is. There is humor in how rigid this becomes. Entire lives are shaped around avoiding excess. Excess joy, excess grief, excess interest in one's own reflection. Men become experts in moderation, not because it feels good, but because it feels safe. Standing among them, mirroring their posture and tone, You feel the weight of it, the discipline, the denial, the quiet pressure to become unremarkable in exactly the right way. You understand then that men are not exempt from beauty standards here. They are simply expected to endure them without acknowledgement. You examine facial hair and realize it is doing far more work than anyone admits. In Victorian England, a beard is not just hair on a face. It is a statement, a credential, and sometimes a warning. Masculinity here is groomed into place carefully, even when everyone pretends it simply grows that way. Clean-shaven faces once signaled civility and modernity, but now whiskers have marched back into fashion with authority. Beards suggest wisdom, maturity, and seriousness. They imply that a man has seen things, endured them, and come out sturdier on the other side. A full beard carries the weight of experience, even if the man wearing it has done little more than attend dinners and nod thoughtfully. But not all beards are equal. Length matters, shape matters. A beard must look intentional, never wild. Too unruly, and it suggests disorder, perhaps even radical ideas. Too manicured, and it suggests vanity. The ideal beard looks effortless while requiring constant maintenance, a contradiction that feels deeply Victorian. Mustaches become their own language. Curled tips suggest flair and confidence, sometimes bordering on arrogance. A neatly trimmed mustache reads as respectable and controlled. A drooping one implies carelessness. Men learn quickly that a few stray hairs can alter how seriously they are taken. Shaving is no less symbolic. A clean-shaven man must look sharp, precise, and deliberate. His jawline is expected to communicate firmness. Any softness must be corrected with posture and expression. Shaving cuts are tolerated. They are proof of effort, little badges of dedication to appearance without admitting concern for it. Grooming routines are conducted quietly. Brushes, oils, razors, and scissors appear behind closed doors. Men do not discuss these rituals openly. To do so would risk acknowledging that masculinity requires upkeep. Instead, the results are presented as natural outcomes of character. Scent plays a role here too. A beard may carry a faint trace of soap, perhaps a whisper of oil. Nothing floral, nothing playful. The smell should suggest cleanliness and restraint. Anything stronger invites suspicion. Masculinity must never smell like it enjoys itself. You notice how facial hair intersects with authority. Professors, politicians, and patriarchs favor styles that make them look immovable. The beard frames the face like a fortress wall. It signals that this man does not bend easily. In a world obsessed with control, that matters. Age changes the rules again. Young men with beards may be trying too hard. Older men without them may be clinging to youth. Gray hairs are assets, woven into the narrative of respect. Dying is unthinkable. Time must be worn honestly, even when everything else is curated. Class sharpens these distinctions. Upper-class men can afford softer grooming choices. Their power cushions deviation. Working-class men are expected to keep things practical. A beard that interferes with labor is indulgent. Cleanliness is praised, but only when it looks functional. You begin to see grooming as performance. Each choice communicates alignment with expectations. The face becomes a public document, revised daily. Men learn to adjust their appearance to fit roles, even when they insist they have none. There is humor in how seriously this is taken. Entire reputations rise and fall on sideburn length. Editorials debate the morality of certain styles. Barbers become confidants, shaping not just hair but identity. A bad trim can feel like a social disaster. Women notice, though they rarely comment directly. A well-groomed man appears reliable. A poorly groomed one appears careless. The beard becomes a shortcut for judgment, saving everyone time. Standing before the mirror, razor or brush in hand, you understand that this is not about vanity. It is about signaling control, about proving you can manage yourself before attempting to manage anything else. In Victorian England, masculinity is not declared loudly. It is trimmed, shaped, and maintained in silence. You learn very quickly that teeth are not just teeth here. They are evidence. They testify quietly to your upbringing, your habits, your self-control, and whether or not you belong in polite company. In Victorian England, a smile is not an invitation. It is a risk. People do not smile freely. They smile cautiously, lips closed, expressions measured. A wide grin exposes too much, and what it exposes will be judged without kindness. Teeth are expected to be orderly, pale, and restrained. Any deviation tells a story you may not want told. Dental care exists, technically, but it is closer to bravery than medicine. Toothbrushes are stiff, powders are abrasive, and advice ranges from mildly helpful to actively alarming. Charcoal scrubs, vinegar rinses, salt mixtures that feel like penance. The goal is not comfort. The goal is control. You notice how breath becomes its own social minefield. Freshness is expected, but discussing it is impolite. Mints exist, but using them too openly implies guilt. A person who smells of mint too strongly is suspected of hiding something worse beneath. The ideal breath smells of nothing at all, which is difficult in a world fueled by boiled meat, strong tea, and pipes. People stand at careful distances when they speak. Conversations are angled, never directly face to face for too long. This is not just politeness, it is strategy. Proximity invites judgment. Bad teeth are interpreted as moral failure. Decay suggests indulgence. Crookedness suggests neglect. Missing teeth imply either poverty or poor judgment, sometimes both. Pain is not an excuse. Endurance is expected. Suffering quietly is considered admirable. You learn that toothaches are common and endured. People work through them, socialize through them, sleep badly and rise anyway. Complaining is frowned upon. Seeking extraction is dramatic and irreversible. Losing a tooth alters how you are seen forever. Smiling too often is suspicious. It suggests frivolity or emotional looseness. Seriousness is safer. A composed expression with minimal exposure communicates reliability. Joy is allowed, but only in moderation and preferably without showing your molars. Women face sharper scrutiny. Their smiles are meant to be gentle, modest, controlled. Bright lipstick is discouraged, not only because it suggests artifice, but because it draws attention to the mouth. Attention leads to inspection. Inspection leads to opinion. Men are expected to keep their mouths firm and neutral. A man who smiles too easily risks appearing unserious. Laughter is allowed, but only when earned. A grin without cause suggests a lack of discipline. You see how quickly reputations form. One poorly timed laugh, one careless smile, one glimpse of uneven teeth. These moments linger in memory far longer than kindness or intelligence. The mouth betrays you even when you mean it no harm. There is dark humor in how much weight is placed on something so fragile. Teeth break. They rot. They ache. Everyone knows this, and yet the judgment persists, relentless and sharp. You catch yourself practicing expressions in reflective surfaces. Lips closed, smile softened, teeth hidden. You learn to laugh behind your hand, to cough strategically, to angle your head just so. The choreography becomes second nature. Breath awareness follows. You avoid certain foods before social events. You rinse discreetly. You chew herbs when no one is looking. You become hyper-aware of the space between you and others, measuring it constantly. The irony is impossible to miss. A society obsessed with restraint lives in constant fear of accidental exposure. One open mouth can undo years of careful presentation. And yet, when you finally witness someone smile freely, truly freely, it feels almost shocking. Their teeth imperfect, their laughter unguarded. For a brief moment, the rules dissolve. Then the room notices. and the room remembers. You understand then why smiles are rationed here, why mouths are managed like reputations. In Victorian England, beauty does not live in the smile. It lives in knowing when not to show one. You explore fashion magazines and advice manuals expecting inspiration and instead find something closer to a polite ultimatum. These publications do not suggest. They instruct. They do not flatter. They warn. Every page feels like it has been written by someone who is disappointed in you personally, despite never having met you. The covers promise improvement in calm, respectable fonts. How to refine your appearance. How to correct common errors. How to avoid becoming that woman. The tone is gentle only on the surface. Underneath, it hums with consequence. Follow this guidance and you may succeed. Ignore it and society will notice immediately. You flip through engravings of ideal figures posed at impossible angles. Waists improbably narrow, necks elongated, expressions serene to the point of near unconsciousness. These are not portraits, they are standards. The accompanying text explains precisely what you are doing wrong and how urgently it must be corrected. Advice arrives disguised as concern. A lady should never appear excessive color, excessive ornament, excessive individuality. Each paragraph carefully outlines what is tasteful, which coincidentally aligns with what is expensive, restrictive, and difficult to achieve without assistance. Simplicity, it turns out, requires remarkable effort. There is constant emphasis on moderation, though the rules for moderation span several pages. Sleeves must be full but not dramatic. Skirts must be ample but not indulgent. Colors must flatter without attracting attention. The ideal outfit somehow exists in a narrow space between invisibility and scrutiny. The manuals are obsessed with correction, correcting posture, correcting complexion, correcting habits, correcting the body itself. The implication is clear. Left alone, you will become unacceptable. Guidance is not optional, it is maintenance. You notice how frequently shame is used as motivation. Warnings are everywhere. A poorly chosen bonnet may suggest poor upbringing. Improper gloves may hint at moral looseness. Shoes that draw the eye too boldly imply a desire for attention, which implies things no one will say aloud but everyone will think. The humor is unintentional but sharp. One article solemnly explains how to walk correctly, noting that an improper gait may suggest inner disorder. Another warns against excessive laughter, advising that a lady should never allow her amusement to distort her features. Beauty, it seems, must remain composed even when joy appears. Men's manuals are no kinder. They warn against flamboyance, softness, and any hint of vanity. A man who dresses too well is suspect. A man who dresses poorly is careless. The ideal lies, once again, in a narrow corridor that shifts depending on who is watching. Fashion magazines insist they are merely reflecting society's expectations, never shaping them. They present rules as natural truths. This is what is admired. This is what is avoided. No alternatives offered. No dissent entertained. Illustrations reinforce the message. Before and after figures demonstrate transformation through compliance. The before is always slouched, poorly dressed, vaguely miserable. The after stands straight, dressed correctly, and looks relieved, as though saved from something unspeakable. You realize these publications are not about creativity. They are about control. They provide a shared script so everyone knows how to judge everyone else. Deviating from it is framed not as personal expression, but as social risk. There is an undercurrent of urgency. Trends change. Advice updates. What was acceptable last season may now be unforgivable. Staying beautiful requires constant vigilance. Falling behind is easy. Catching up is expensive. You find yourself reading more closely than you want to admit, measuring yourself against the diagrams, adjusting imaginary hems, correcting posture without realizing it. The manuals work because they make you complicit. Occasionally, A sentence cuts deeper than the rest. A remark about how neglect reflects character. A warning that appearance reveals the soul. These ideas settle quietly and stay. By the time you close the magazine, you feel informed and insufficient, educated and uneasy. Exactly as intended, in Victorian England, fashion advice is not about looking good. It is about avoiding becoming a cautionary example. You witness beauty rituals not taught so much as inherited, handed down quietly in bedrooms and washrooms like family secrets that come with instructions and consequences. Mothers do not frame these lessons as indulgence or self-care. They frame them as survival. Sit still. Hold your breath. Do not complain. This is for your own good. The first lesson is always observation. You watch before you are allowed to touch anything. How she powders her face lightly, never admitting it is powder. How she pins her hair with practiced tension, tight enough to obey but loose enough to look effortless. How she checks her reflection not for admiration, but for errors. You learn quickly that mirrors are not for vanity. They are for correction. She speaks gently, but the message is firm. Beauty is not something you enjoy. It is something you maintain. She warns you about skin, about posture, about how quickly society notices when a girl lets herself go. The language is careful, but the meaning is sharp. Attention is dangerous. Neglect is worse. Rituals follow a strict order. Washing must be thorough but not indulgent. Hairbrushing is counted, strokes measured and repeated until the scalp tingles just enough to promise obedience. Products are applied sparingly. Too much suggests excess. Too little suggests carelessness. There is always a correct amount, and you are expected to feel it intuitively. Corsetry enters the conversation early. She does not dramatize it. She normalizes it. Every woman wears one. It improves posture. It supports the figure. She does not mention discomfort unless you do, and even then, it is reframed as adjustment. You will get used to it. Everyone does. Food becomes part of the ritual too. Portions are discussed quietly. Hunger is acknowledged, but managed. A little emptiness is treated as refinement. She reminds you that self-control is admired. Appetite is something to be trained, not trusted. Hair care is layered with symbolism. Long hair is praised. It signals patience, health, virtue. Cutting it is discussed like a last resort. Only illness or disgrace justifies it. You are taught to protect it, braid it, hide it when necessary. Hair is power here, and power must be managed carefully. She tells you stories while she works, not fairy tales. Examples: the girl who laughed too loudly, the woman who dressed too boldly, the cousin who gained weight after marriage and became invisible. These are not told with cruelty. They are told with concern. This is what happens if you are careless. There is humor sometimes, dry and brief. A comment about how ridiculous fashion can be. A quiet joke about impossible standards. But it never lasts. The rules remain. Humor does not erase consequence. You notice how little choice is involved. The rituals are presented as facts, not preferences. This is how things are done. This is what works. This is what keeps you safe. Any deviation is framed as risk, not rebellion. As you grow, the lessons intensify. Skin must be protected from sun and scrutiny. Smiles must be moderated. Movement must be controlled. You are reminded constantly that everything you do is noticed, interpreted, remembered. There is tenderness in these moments, but it is layered with anxiety. She wants you to succeed. She wants you to be accepted. She wants to spare you the pain she knows too well. Her hands are careful, practiced, sometimes trembling slightly when she tightens a lace or adjusts a pin. One evening, as she finishes, she pauses longer than usual. She looks at you, really looks. There is something unspoken there, not pride, not joy, something closer to worry. She tells you this is not about beauty. It is about being treated well. Years later, you realize these rituals were never gifts. They were warnings wrapped in routine. Love expressed through preparation, fear disguised as guidance. In Victorian England, beauty is not taught to make you shine. It is taught to keep you from being punished for existing. You see quickly that beauty here is not universal. It bends depending on who you are, where you stand, and how much money cushions your mistakes. The same feature admired on one body becomes an offense on another. Elegance, you learn, is not a look. It is permission. Among the wealthy, softness reads as refinement. Pale hands untouched by labor are praised for their delicacy. A slender figure suggests leisure, restraint, and the luxury of choice. Time itself seems to smooth their edges. If a lady moves slowly, it is graceful. If she speaks softly, it is tasteful. If she eats little, it is admirable. The poor are judged by an entirely different ruler. Strength becomes necessity, not virtue. A sturdy body means work, survival, resilience. But instead of admiration, it earns suspicion. Hands marked by labor are read as coarse. A healthy appetite becomes greed. Loudness becomes vulgarity. The same traits that keep people alive are treated as aesthetic failures. Clothing reveals everything. Rich fabrics forgive excess. Lace, silk, velvet. These materials can be layered, ornamented, indulged. When wealth drapes itself in decoration, it is considered cultured. When poverty attempts the same, it is labeled gaudy. Too much color on the wrong person is not enthusiasm. It is a crime against taste. You notice how posture changes meaning. An upright stance on a well-dressed body signals confidence. The same stance on a laborer can be read as defiance. Slouching among the wealthy appears relaxed, even charming. Slouching among the poor confirms every stereotype. Bodies are read differently depending on who owns them. Cosmetics expose the divide sharply. Pale skin on an upper-class woman suggests refinement and careful living. Pale skin on a working woman suggests illness or weakness. Color in the cheeks is charming on one face, improper on another. Makeup is allowed only when it looks invisible and costs enough to pretend it is not makeup at all. Hair follows similar rules. Elaborate styles on the wealthy are praised as artistry. The same complexity on someone poor is treated as overreaching. Simplicity is encouraged for the working class, but never rewarded. A plain appearance is expected, not admired. Even cleanliness is classed. The rich smell faintly of soap and money. Their cleanliness is assumed. The poor are expected to be clean but never scented, never polished, never too careful. Trying too hard invites mockery. Not trying enough invites disgust. There is no correct amount. Men are not spared. A gentleman's softness is intellectual. A laborer's softness is weakness. A wealthy man's sturdy build suggests strength. A poor man's sturdy build suggests brutishness. Grooming choices praised in one class are ridiculed in another. You begin to see how taste itself is guarded. Fashion rules shift subtly to keep boundaries intact. As soon as something becomes accessible, it loses status. Once a style appears in poorer neighborhoods, it is quietly abandoned by those who set the standard. Beauty moves like a locked door, always just out of reach. There is humor in how transparent this is. Advice columns preach modesty while celebrating excess for those who can afford it. Moral lectures target the poor while excusing the wealthy with words like eccentric and artistic. The rules pretend to be about aesthetics, but they function as fences. You realize that beauty here is a language of belonging. It tells others where you come from and where you are allowed to go. Deviating from your assigned aesthetic does not elevate you. It irritates people who benefit from the order. Occasionally, you witness someone crossing these lines successfully. a working woman dressed impeccably, carrying herself with quiet confidence. The response is mixed, admiration tinged with resentment, curiosity edged with suspicion. She is praised for effort, but reminded constantly of her place. The lesson becomes clear. Beauty is not judged on its own merits. It is weighed against expectation. What looks natural on one person looks inappropriate on another. Standing between these worlds, watching the same features praised and punished depending on class, you understand the quiet cruelty of it. In Victorian England, beauty does not erase hierarchy, it reinforces it. You experience what it means to be plain here, and it is not neutrality, it is not rest. It is a social condition with consequences that unfold quietly, almost politely, until you realize how much has been taken from you without announcement. Being plain does not mean ugly. It means unremarkable in the wrong way. Your features fail to trigger admiration or concern. They simply pass through rooms unnoticed. Conversations move around you as if you are furniture that has always been there. Doors are not slammed in your face. They are simply never opened. You learn this first in drawing rooms and shops. Clerks look past you when better adorned customers enter. Compliments land on others and skip you entirely, like stones on water. No one is cruel outright. That would require effort. Indifference is cheaper and far more effective. Improper adornment makes things worse. A ribbon tied slightly wrong. Gloves worn too long. Shoes polished inconsistently. These small missteps are cataloged immediately. They signal ignorance rather than rebellion, and ignorance is unforgivable. People assume you have not learned the rules, which means someone failed you, or you failed to listen. You notice how quickly assumptions form. If your dress is too plain, you must be dull. If your colors clash, you must be careless. If your jewelry is outdated, you must be behind in more ways than one. Appearance becomes shorthand for character. No questions asked. Invisibility has a strange weight. You are present, but not accounted for. Opinions offered by you drift away, unacknowledged. Your laughter fades into the room without echo. You are not disliked. You are simply not factored in. There is dark humor in how much effort invisibility requires. You must actively fail to meet expectations. You must miss trends, misunderstand rules, or lack resources consistently. Plainness is not accidental here. It is cumulative. You feel it most sharply in social negotiations. Introductions are shorter. Invitations arrive late, or not at all. Prospects diminish quietly. Suitors look through you rather than at you. Employers hesitate. Teachers invest less. Everyone saves their energy for someone more promising. Improper adornment invites a different response, not invisibility, but scrutiny. Too much color, too much ornament, too much confidence. These draw attention, but the wrong kind. Whispered assessments follow you. Raised eyebrows. Pauses in conversation. You have broken an unspoken rule, and now you are a topic. Women feel this especially. A dress too bold suggests hunger for attention. A neckline too daring invites judgment. A hairstyle too elaborate appears desperate. The line between effort and excess is thin and constantly moving. Missing it by inches changes everything. Men are not spared. A tie too flamboyant, a coat too worn, boots too polished or not polished enough. Each choice communicates something you may not intend. Improper adornment suggests either vanity or neglect. Both are punished. You realize how exhausting this is. Constant self-monitoring, adjusting to rooms, reading faces, correcting details before anyone else notices. Plainness feels safer than being wrong, but safety comes at the cost of presence. Occasionally, someone kind notices you. A comment offered, a question asked. These moments feel startling, almost intimate. You cling to them longer than you should. They remind you that visibility is possible, but conditional. There is cruelty in how beauty operates here, but it is quiet cruelty. No one announces your failure. No one explains what you did wrong. The rules are assumed to be obvious. If you do not follow them, the fault is yours. You begin to understand that beauty here is not about pleasure. It is about access to conversation, to opportunity, to being considered. Standing in a crowded room, properly washed, modestly dressed, perfectly plain, you feel the full effect of it. You are surrounded by people and entirely alone. In Victorian England, being plain does not protect you. It erases you. You learn very quickly that beauty here is not about admiration. It is about placement. In Victorian England, beauty is the currency that buys you a future, and marriage is the institution that decides whether you eat, where you live, and how safely you age. Romance exists, but it is a luxury item, unevenly distributed and rarely prioritized. From the moment you are noticed as attractive, people begin planning around you. Compliments come bundled with expectations. Your appearance is discussed in terms of potential. You are not praised for yourself. You are evaluated for what you could secure: a good match, a stable household, protection from the many ways life can unravel without a husband's name attached to it. Marriage is presented as destiny, but it functions more like infrastructure. It provides shelter, income, legitimacy, and social standing. Without it, you are exposed. Beauty becomes the admission ticket to this structure. Without beauty, entry is uncertain. With it, at least the door opens. You notice how conversations shift once marriage enters the room. Beauty advice suddenly sounds urgent. Youth becomes precious. Time is no longer abstract. It is counted in seasons and appearances. A woman past her perceived prime becomes a problem to be solved. Her beauty must be maximized, managed, displayed before it fades beyond usefulness. Men benefit too, though differently. A handsome man is assumed capable. A well-presented man attracts opportunity. Marriage rewards him with respectability and order. A wife manages his household, his reputation, his daily comfort. His appearance helps him choose. Hers helps her survive. You see how unmarried women are discussed when they are not present, with pity, with speculation, with quiet concern that hardens into judgment over time. A woman without a husband is assumed to have failed somewhere. Either she lacked beauty or she misused it. Neither option earns sympathy. Economic reality presses in from every side. Employment for women is limited, poorly paid, and socially precarious. Living alone invites scrutiny. Living with family indefinitely marks you as a burden. Marriage solves these problems efficiently. Beauty improves your odds. The pressure intensifies as you watch others navigate it. Mothers calculate prospects. Fathers assess dowries. Suitors measure worth. All of it happens politely, over tea, with smiles that never quite reach the eyes. Love may arrive, but it is not required. Compatibility matters less than stability. You learn that beauty must be visible, but controlled. Enough to attract interest, not enough to suggest impropriety. A woman who appears too desirable risks damaging her own chances. Reputation is fragile. One rumor can undo years of careful presentation. Marriage, once achieved, becomes proof that your beauty was valid. A ring retroactively justifies the effort. Without it, beauty is treated as wasteful, even suspicious. What was all that preparation for? People wonder quietly. There is humor in how openly transactional this all is, while pretending to be sentimental. Poetry celebrates love. Society enforces contracts. Advice manuals insist happiness follows marriage, then warn constantly about choosing wrong. Beauty is framed as blessing and burden simultaneously. You notice how women who marry well are forgiven for fading. Once secured, their appearance can soften, their bodies can change, their faces can age. beauty has done its job. Unmarried women are not granted this mercy. They are expected to remain presentable indefinitely. Like shop windows no one enters, men age into authority. Women age into anxiety. Marriage determines which path you take. Standing at the edge of this system, watching how beauty is groomed toward a single outcome, you understand the equation clearly. Beauty leads to marriage. Marriage leads to safety. Without beauty, the path narrows dangerously. This is not cruelty for its own sake. It is structure, brutal, efficient, and widely accepted. In Victorian England, beauty is not about being seen. It is about being chosen before time runs out. You watch doctors step into the conversation with absolute certainty, and suddenly beauty is no longer just social pressure, it is medical advice. White coats and polished instruments lend authority to ideas that were already dangerous, and now they arrive stamped with science, or at least something calling itself that. Physicians speak calmly about proportions, symmetry, and proper development, as though the body were a blueprint that occasionally needs correction. A narrow waist is not just attractive, it is healthy. A pale complexion is not just refined, it indicates balance. Any deviation is framed as a concern, something to be monitored, managed, adjusted. You sit in waiting rooms, surrounded by anatomical diagrams that quietly double as beauty charts. Ideal forms are sketched into textbooks. Average becomes undesirable. Difference becomes defect. Doctors measure and observe with practiced detachment, never questioning the standard itself. Women are advised to lace tightly to support internal organs. They are told faintness is natural, even expected. Weakness becomes evidence of femininity functioning correctly. Complaints are waved away gently. Adjustment takes time. Your body will learn. Medical language transforms discomfort into virtue. Hunger sharpens the mind. Thinness preserves health. Restlessness is hysteria. A woman who feels unwell is often told her nerves are responsible, and her nerves are blamed on excess emotion, imagination, or improper habits. You notice how confidently doctors prescribe restraint. Eat less, sit straighter, move delicately, sleep properly. All advice circles back to discipline. A well-managed body is a beautiful body, and beauty is treated as proof of good health rather than its byproduct. Men receive their own lectures. Broad shoulders are praised. Strong jaws suggest vitality. A soft body is warned against, framed as moral and physical decline. Doctors warn men that indulgence weakens both muscle and character. Health becomes another arena for self-control. There is humor in how flexible medical certainty is. One decade praises tight corsets. Another warns against them. 1 year pale skin is ideal. Another suggests a touch of color signals vigor. The authority remains constant even as the advice contradicts itself. You hear about treatments that promise improvement, powders to whiten skin, tonics to suppress appetite, drops to calm nerves, pills to correct temperament. Ingredients are mysterious. Effects are unpredictable. Confidence is unwavering. Doctors speak of women's bodies as if they are perpetually on the verge of malfunction. Puberty, menstruation, pregnancy, menopause, all described as conditions requiring oversight. Beauty is used as a diagnostic tool. A woman who looks correct must be functioning correctly. You realize how little consent matters. Patients defer to expertise. Families trust authority. A doctor's word outweighs discomfort. If beauty and health align, any pain endured in pursuit of that alignment is justified. There is a quiet fear that runs beneath it all. Fear of degeneration, fear of disorder, fear that bodies left unmanaged will unravel society itself. Beauty standards become a defense against chaos, and medicine positions itself as the gatekeeper. You see how quickly medical opinions spread into households. Mothers repeat advice verbatim. Magazines quote doctors approvingly. Beauty routines become health routines without anyone noticing the shift. Standing in an examination room, listening to a physician explain why your body must be corrected for your own good, you feel the weight of it, the certainty, the calm, the lack of doubt. This is no longer about taste or fashion. It is about being declared acceptable by someone with credentials. In Victorian England, medicine does not challenge beauty standards. It enforces them with alarming confidence. You confront the physical cost of all this beauty and realize that the fainting couches are not decorative. They are necessary infrastructure. Bodies pushed into obedience eventually protest, and Victorian England responds not by listening, but by normalizing the collapse. Fainting is everywhere. Parlors pause while someone swoons gracefully onto upholstered furniture. Smelling salts appear like stage props. The room murmurs with practiced concern. No one asks why this keeps happening. It is simply understood as part of womanhood, like lace or silence. You learn that tight lacing reshapes more than the waist. Ribs compress, organs shift. Breathing becomes shallow and strategic. People boast about tiny measurements, while quietly dealing with dizziness, nausea, and a constant pressure that never quite leaves. Pain is framed as adjustment. Endurance becomes evidence of refinement. Corsets are blamed gently, if at all. More often, the body is blamed for resisting. A woman who cannot tolerate tight lacing is considered weak, overly sensitive, or improperly trained. The solution is not loosening. It is persistence. Chronic pain lives beneath layers of fabric and politeness. Headaches linger. Backs ache. Digestion falters. Sleep comes unevenly. These discomforts are discussed in whispers, if discussed at all. Complaining too openly risks being labeled dramatic. Silence is safer. You notice how illness becomes aesthetic. Fragility is admired. A delicate constitution suggests refinement. Robust health reads as coarse. Women praised for looking ethereal often feel perpetually unwell, but the praise is powerful enough to drown out concern. Doctors recommend rest for nervous conditions, which often means confinement, dark rooms, limited activity, controlled diets. The cure for beauty-related illness frequently involves further restriction. Recovery looks suspiciously like discipline. Men suffer differently, but no less quietly. Stiff collars strain necks. Heavy boots punish feet. Rigid posture leads to back pain that is ignored or joked away. Admitting discomfort undermines authority. A man is expected to bear it. You hear stories passed casually. A cousin who fainted repeatedly and was praised for her delicacy until she collapsed one final time. A friend whose organs never recovered after years of tight lacing. A woman whose chronic pain was dismissed as nerves until it consumed her days. The humor is dark and unintentional. Society marvels at how pale and composed someone looks while stepping carefully around the reality that she cannot climb stairs without dizziness. Beauty is celebrated even as it incapacitates. Pain becomes background noise. It is expected, managed, minimized. People learn to function around it, adjusting movements, timing meals, sitting frequently, planning days around endurance. You realize how language softens everything. Injuries are called discomforts. Illnesses are moods. Pain is framed as inconvenience rather than warning. The vocabulary protects the standard, not the body. Occasionally, someone breaks. A woman loosens her corset and breathes deeply in private. A man removes his collar and rubs his neck when alone. These moments feel illicit, almost rebellious. Relief becomes something to hide. Standing in a room where beauty is admired and suffering is ignored, you feel the disconnect sharpen. The cost is visible if you know where to look. Pale faces, slow movements, hands trembling just slightly when they think no one is watching. And yet, the system persists. Because acknowledging the harm would require rethinking the standard, and that feels more dangerous than pain. You understand then that these illnesses are not accidents. They are features, the quiet tax paid for acceptance. In Victorian England, beauty does not just shape the body, it teaches the body to suffer politely. You explore scent and quickly realize that the Victorian body is not meant to be smelled. It is meant to be concealed, corrected, and politely erased. Natural odor is treated as a moral failure, a sign that something about you is unmanaged, uncontrolled, or dangerously close to animal. The problem is that this is an age of coal smoke, horse traffic, heavy wool, unventilated rooms, and bathing that is careful rather than frequent. Bodies exist. They sweat. They work. They age. Society responds not by addressing conditions, but by layering fragrance over everything and hoping no one notices what is underneath. Perfume becomes both essential and suspect. A light scent is acceptable, even admired, but only if it whispers. Anything noticeable risks judgment. Too much fragrance suggests you are hiding something. Too little suggests you are careless. The ideal scent is one no one can quite identify, only sense faintly as cleanliness and restraint. Women are taught early that scent must never arrive before they do. Floral notes are favored, especially rose, lavender, and violet. These smells suggest purity, calm, and emotional softness. They are meant to float just above the skin, never cling. A woman who smells strongly of perfume is assumed to be compensating. Men's scents are sharper, but no less controlled. Citrus, wood, tobacco, clean and brisk. Masculinity is allowed scent, but not indulgence. A man who smells too pleasant invites suspicion. Groomed, yes. Fragrant, no. You notice how scent is tied to class. The wealthy smell faintly of soap, linen, and expensive subtlety. Their cleanliness is assumed even when their homes are just as stale as everyone else's. The poor are judged harshly. Any hint of bodily odor is read as moral failure rather than environmental reality. Products multiply in response. Scented powders, pomades, sachets tucked into drawers and sleeves, gloves perfumed on the inside, handkerchiefs dabbed carefully before outings. Entire industries exist to help people pretend their bodies are not bodies at all. There is humor in the contradiction. Advice columns warn against heavy perfume while advertising increasingly potent products. Doctors caution moderation while endorsing scented tonics. Everyone agrees excess is bad. No one agrees on what excess means. Public spaces are a battlefield of smells. Horse manure outside, coal smoke everywhere. Inside, layers of perfume, soap, damp fabric, and human presence mix into something almost aggressive. The solution is always more fragrance, never less crowding. You learn that scent carries reputation. A familiar smell can follow someone long after they leave a room. It becomes a signature, intentional or not. People notice, they remember, they talk. Cleanliness is preached constantly, but the standards are impossible. Baths are limited, water is cold, privacy is scarce, soap is harsh, yet the expectation remains. Smelling neutral becomes a daily performance. You begin to understand why masking becomes obsession. It is easier to cover than to change conditions. Easier to perfume than to ventilate. Easier to judge individuals than to address infrastructure. There is quiet anxiety around it. People check themselves constantly. They adjust gloves. They sniff discreetly. They reapply when they think no one is looking. Fear of offending noses becomes fear of offending society itself. Occasionally, someone ignores the rules. A woman wears a bold scent unapologetically. A man smells of labor and makes no effort to hide it. The response is swift. Comments, distance, disapproval dressed as concern. Standing in a crowded room, layered in fabric and fragrance, you feel the weight of it. The constant effort to be unnoticeable in the most specific way possible. The denial of the body through scent. In Victorian England, smell is not just sensory, It is social evidence, and everyone is trying desperately to erase it. You discover that aging is treated here less like a natural process and more like a looming accusation. Time is not something that passes. It is something that stalks, waiting for the moment it can be proven on your face. In Victorian England, youth is not admired gently. It is guarded aggressively. From an early age, you are warned about it. Not directly, of course. The warnings come wrapped in advice. Protect your skin from the sun. Do not laugh too much. Do not frown. Do not worry. Worry shows. Everything shows, eventually. The message is clear. Your face is a ledger, and time is writing in ink. Powder becomes the first line of defense. It blurs, softens, evens. It settles into fine lines and pretends they are not there. Applied carefully, it suggests smoothness where smoothness is already fading. Too much powder, however, announces desperation. You must hide age without appearing to care that you are hiding it. Denial is encouraged. Aging is not discussed openly. A woman does not grow older. She becomes more mature, more settled, more dignified. Words do the work that mirrors refuse to do. Any visible change is reframed as lighting, fatigue, or imagination. Hair follows suit. Gray strands are managed quietly, pulled out, hidden in styles that catch the light just right. Dye exists, but it is whispered about, risky and improper. A woman must age gracefully, which means aging only where it flatters and nowhere else. Men are allowed a different narrative. Gray hair becomes distinguished. Lines suggest wisdom. Age settles into authority for them, while for women it becomes something to outrun. A man's aging face adds weight to his voice. A woman's aging face subtracts attention from hers. You see how this fear reshapes behavior. Older women soften their expressions to avoid lines. They choose clothing meant to suggest timelessness, which usually means invisibility. They speak less in public spaces, letting youth occupy the center. Advice manuals grow more urgent with age. How to maintain freshness, how to preserve vitality, how to avoid appearing tired. There is always an implication that effort might save you if you try hard enough. Failure is personal. Illness accelerates the anxiety, a fever that hollows cheeks, stress that deepens lines. Life leaves marks, and society punishes you for showing them. Rest is prescribed, but rest rarely fits into reality. There is humor in the collective pretending. Everyone notices age. Everyone comments on it privately. Publicly, no one acknowledges it at all. Compliments become strange. You look well for your age. You haven't changed a bit. These phrases hover between kindness and cruelty. You begin to understand why youth is idolized. It is not just beauty, it is possibility. Youth suggests that nothing irreversible has happened yet. Once age becomes visible, your story feels narrower. Fewer roles, fewer chances, less patience from the world. Powder thickens. Hairstyles stiffen. Jewelry becomes more conservative. Everything signals stability rather than allure. This transition is expected, even demanded. Resisting it invites ridicule. Accepting it invites invisibility. Standing in front of the mirror, light carefully arranged, you catch sight of yourself between eras. Not young enough to be celebrated, not old enough to be dismissed entirely. This in-between space feels dangerous. You realize then that aging here is not feared because it ends beauty. It is feared because it exposes how conditional beauty always was, and how quickly the world moves on once it decides you no longer represent possibility. You see beauty come alive most vividly at night, under chandeliers and candlelight, where it stops being theory and becomes transaction. Balls, dinners, and crowded parlors turn appearance into currency, exchanged silently across rooms with practiced glances and carefully timed smiles. No one says this out loud, but everyone understands the economy immediately. Entering a room is an event. You are assessed before you are greeted. Dresses rustle, coats are removed, posture straightens instinctively, faces settle into their best versions. Beauty here is not static. It activates the moment others are present. At a ball, movement matters as much as stillness. The way you stand at the edge of the room signals confidence or uncertainty. Too eager and you appear desperate. Too passive and you fade into the wallpaper. Beauty must look effortless, even though effort hums beneath every gesture. Glances become negotiations. A look held half a second longer than polite can mean interest, curiosity, or challenge. A look broken too quickly suggests insecurity. Eyes flicker constantly, measuring, comparing, ranking. Who is admired? Who is ignored? Who has risen since last season? Who has slipped? You notice how women cluster strategically, arranging themselves to maximize advantage. A striking woman placed beside a plainer one looks even more impressive. Youth positioned next to maturity reads as promise. Fashion becomes chess, each placement deliberate. Men circulate differently. They observe, approach, retreat. A confident stride carries weight. Hesitation costs opportunities. Beauty influences who is spoken to, but confidence determines how long the conversation lasts. Still, appearance opens the door. At dinner parties, seating is its own hierarchy. Proximity to hosts signals favor. Attractive guests are placed where they can be seen, admired, and discussed. Less desirable ones are tucked away politely. Conversation flows around the table, but attention does not distribute evenly. Compliments are currency too, given sparingly, received carefully. To accept too eagerly looks vain. To deflect too much looks ungrateful. The perfect response acknowledges without indulging. Thank you. That is kind. Then redirect. Keep moving. You realize how beauty buys patience. Mistakes are forgiven more easily. Awkwardness is charming rather than embarrassing. Silence becomes mysterious instead of dull. Those without beauty do not receive these allowances. Their errors linger. Music swells. Dancing begins. Partners are chosen based on a complex mix of attractiveness, reputation, and strategy. Being asked to dance is validation. Being overlooked is information. Each set rearranges the social map. There is humor in how subtle it all is. No one announces their ambitions. No one admits they are watching. And yet the room hums with quiet calculation. Who will marry well? Who will secure influence? Who will be talked about tomorrow? You feel the weight of constant visibility. Every laugh carries meaning. Every movement can elevate or diminish. Beauty becomes performance under scrutiny, and the audience is relentless. Even those who pretend indifference are participating. A person who claims not to care about appearances often cares deeply that others believe them. Detachment itself becomes a kind of aesthetic. You watch alliances form over shared admiration. Rivalries sharpen through comparison. A well-dressed newcomer can shift the balance instantly. Beauty injects energy into the room, rearranging attention like furniture. Standing near the edge, you notice how quickly momentum builds. Once attention turns towards someone, it multiplies. People want what others value. Beauty compounds. And yet, it is fleeting. A stumble, a rumor, a younger face entering the room. The currency fluctuates constantly. Nothing is guaranteed beyond the moment. As the evening winds down, you see exhaustion beneath the polish. Smiles strain, posture falters. The effort shows through the glamour. Beauty demands stamina. Leaving the room, you understand the truth clearly. These gatherings are not about enjoyment. They are marketplaces disguised as celebrations. In Victorian England, beauty is not admired quietly. It is traded in plain sight. One look at a time. You encounter rebellion not as shouting or spectacle, but as something quieter and far more unsettling to the order around it. It arrives disguised as small choices: a loosened lace, a dress worn a season too long, a woman who pauses before complying and then does something slightly different instead. At first, you almost miss it. Victorian rebellion is not loud. Loudness attracts correction. It lives in margins and timing and tone. It lives in women who follow the rules just poorly enough to retain themselves. You meet one at a gathering, a woman whose posture is perfect, but whose corset is laced a fraction looser than expected. She breathes fully. You notice because she laughs, and the laugh does not sound rationed. No one comments on it, but several people notice. The room adjusts around her in subtle ways. Another woman refuses powder, not dramatically. She simply never quite uses enough to erase herself. Her skin shows texture. Lines appear when she smiles. People call her plain at first, then interesting, then unsettling. She does not correct them. You see women cut their hair slightly shorter than fashion dictates, still long enough to pass inspection, but free enough to brush their shoulders when they walk. The movement alone feels defiant. Hair is supposed to stay put. Hers does not. Some rebellions hide inside competence. A woman manages a household so effectively that no one questions why she never married. Her authority grows quietly. She dresses simply, moves decisively, and speaks when necessary. Beauty standards slide off her because she offers usefulness instead, and usefulness confuses people who rely on appearance as shorthand. Others rebel through absence. They stop attending events where they are measured too closely. They avoid rooms designed for comparison. Their social circles shrink, but within those smaller spaces, they breathe. The withdrawal itself is a refusal to be ranked. You notice how often rebellion wears humor. A woman jokes about corsets being modern torture devices, laughs lightly, and then never tightens hers again. A raised eyebrow here, a dry remark there. Nothing confrontational, nothing actionable, enough to signal awareness. Some women refuse motherhood, quietly. Without announcement, they redirect expectations toward caregiving, teaching, or work that fills their days and gives them standing. Society struggles to categorize them. Pity mixes with suspicion. They persist anyway. There are women who dress beautifully, but incorrectly. Colors chosen for joy rather than approval. Patterns combined against advice. Jewelry worn for personal meaning rather than display. They accept the glances and continue. You realize how dangerous visibility is for rebellion. The most successful refusals look accidental. A misstep, a quirk, a temperament. Anything but intention. Intention invites correction. Men notice these women too, sometimes admiring, sometimes threatened. A woman who does not perform correctly unsettles the exchange. She cannot be easily valued or dismissed. She introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is uncomfortable. Doctors frown at them. Advice manuals warn against them indirectly. Mothers caution daughters about becoming like them. And yet, they exist, persistently, quietly. They do not dismantle the system, but they loosen it. You feel the pull of it yourself, the appeal of small freedoms, breathing more deeply, moving more honestly, dressing for your own body rather than an ideal diagram. Each choice feels heavier than it should, because consequences exist, even when unspoken. There is no parade for these women, no recognition. Many live lives misunderstood or underappreciated. Some are labeled odd, some are labeled difficult, some are quietly admired and never imitated. But they leave traces. Younger women watch them. Notice what they survive. Notice what does not actually collapse when rules bend. The standard holds, but not as tightly as it claims. Standing among them, you understand the truth that makes rebellion possible here. The system depends on everyone believing there is no alternative. They prove otherwise, without ever saying so. In Victorian England, resistance rarely looks like defiance. It looks like a woman choosing herself just enough to remain standing. You explore beauty and realize it stretches far beyond drawing rooms and corsets, reaching outward across oceans, colonies, and maps colored in confident red. Victorian beauty is not only personal or social, it is imperial. It carries assumptions about who belongs at the center of the world and who exists at its edges. Whiteness is treated as default, ideal, and unremarkable all at once. Pale skin is praised not just for delicacy, but for what it implies. Distance from labor, distance from sun, distance from anywhere considered uncivilized. Lightness becomes shorthand for superiority, wrapped in the language of refinement rather than openly stated. You notice how often beauty manuals reference exotic features while insisting they must be corrected. Darker skin is described as coarse. Curly hair is framed as unruly. Strong features are labeled excessive. The goal is always moderation, which conveniently aligns with European norms. Anything outside that range is either romanticized as novelty or dismissed as flaw. Empire feeds fashion. Fabrics arrive from colonies. Dyes extracted elsewhere, color dresses worn in London parlors. Jewelry references distant places stripped of context and worn as decoration. The empire is admired aesthetically while the people who sustain it are reduced to inspiration at best, obstacles at worst. Beauty ideals absorb these influences selectively. Certain traits are borrowed and softened. Patterns, textures, and silhouettes are adapted just enough to seem worldly without threatening the hierarchy. The source is rarely acknowledged. Ownership is implied. You see how race becomes embedded in the idea of improvement. Whitening creams promise correction. Hair products aim to smooth, straighten, discipline. Advice columns speak of elevating appearance, a phrase that carries more weight than it pretends. To look beautiful is to look closer to the imperial center. People of color living within the empire face a cruel contradiction. They are expected to assimilate aesthetically while never being allowed full acceptance. Their features are scrutinized relentlessly. Too different is unacceptable. Too similar is suspicious. Beauty becomes a moving target designed to remain just out of reach. You notice how bodies are compared. European features are framed as balanced and rational. Others are described as excessive, emotional, or primitive. These judgments extend beyond appearance into assumptions about intellect, morality, and worth. Beauty becomes evidence used to justify power. There is a quiet arrogance in how confidently these standards are presented. They are described as natural, scientific, inevitable. Rarely are they named as cultural preferences shaped by conquest and control. The empire teaches itself to admire its own reflection. You hear conversations about progress and civilization that link beauty to destiny. Those who look right are assumed fit to lead. Those who do not are framed as needing guidance. Aesthetic judgment becomes political logic. Fashion illustrations reinforce this without comment. Ideal figures are pale, composed, and European. Other bodies appear only as contrast or curiosity. The message does not need explanation. It repeats often enough to become background truth. There is discomfort in realizing how beauty participates in this structure. Preferences feel personal until you see how consistently they align with power. Attraction is not immune to conditioning. Neither is taste. You watch how women internalize this. Sun avoidance becomes obsession. Complexions are guarded fiercely. Anything that darkens skin is treated as threat. The empire exists on maps and bodies simultaneously. Men participate too. Masculinity is framed through control, restraint, and dominance, traits mirrored in imperial ideology. The disciplined body reflects the disciplined empire. Disorder is feared everywhere. There is irony in how much effort goes into maintaining these ideals. The empire strains under its own weight. Bodies strain under their expectations. Yet the standards persist. because they serve a purpose beyond beauty. Standing back, you see the full shape of it. Beauty is not just about who is admired. It is about who is centered, who is copied, who is corrected, who is erased. In Victorian England, beauty does not simply reflect empire. It helps justify it, quietly and constantly, every time someone is told they do not look quite right. You see, photography arrives quietly, almost politely, and then everything stiffens. Beauty, once fleeting and negotiable, is suddenly trapped in silvered glass and paper. What was once adjusted by candlelight and movement now has to survive scrutiny forever. At first, portraits are rare and expensive. Sitting for one feels ceremonial. You are arranged carefully, positioned like furniture meant to impress future generations. The photographer speaks calmly, instructing you to hold still, to maintain the expression that best represents you. This is not about how you feel. It is about how you will be remembered. Stillness becomes critical. Exposure times stretch long enough to punish fidgeting. Smiling is dangerous. Smiles blur. Smiles soften authority. Faces settle into seriousness not because it feels right, but because it lasts. The Victorian stare is born here, out of necessity and fear. You realize quickly that photography does not forgive. A bad angle becomes permanent. A tired day becomes legacy. Powder that looked subtle in person turns chalky under the lens. Shadows exaggerate lines. Light betrays texture. Everything you have worked to manage now answers to chemistry instead of manners. People begin preparing differently. Hair is arranged with rigidity. Clothing stiffens. Corsets tighten further to ensure the silhouette holds under inspection. Beauty becomes less about impression and more about documentation. You notice how photographs circulate. Families display them prominently. Suitors request them. Employers examine them. Faces travel where bodies cannot, carrying judgments ahead of introductions. A photograph can precede you into rooms you have never entered. This changes everything. Reputation is no longer confined to memory and gossip. It is framed, hung, passed down. A bad photograph lingers longer than a bad evening. Women feel this pressure acutely. A portrait is expected to capture youth, virtue, and composure simultaneously. Any hint of wear invites interpretation. Any softness becomes evidence. Photographs do not age with you. They fossilize you at a moment you may never quite live up to again. Men experience it differently, but no less intensely. Authority must register on film. Weakness must not. A man's portrait should suggest stability and control, even if the day it was taken was anything but. Photography turns masculinity into an artifact. There is humor in how unnatural everyone looks. Bodies freeze into poses never held in real life. Expressions harden into masks. Children stare solemnly, trained not to move. The result is a gallery of humanity caught holding its breath. People learn to perform for the camera. They practice expressions in mirrors. They study successful portraits. They adapt. Beauty standards shift subtly to accommodate the lens. What photographs well becomes what is valued. Photography also democratizes judgment. You no longer need to see someone in person to evaluate them. A single image can confirm suspicion or elevate status. Beauty becomes portable and fixed. You see how this affects aging. A photograph from youth becomes a benchmark you are forever compared to. Any deviation feels like loss rather than change. Time becomes cruelly visible in contrast. There is anxiety in knowing that one moment may define you. People delay sittings, waiting for better days, better weight, better skin. Others rush to capture themselves before age arrives too visibly. The camera waits patiently. You also notice how photographs reinforce hierarchy. Who can afford portraits? Who can choose flattering settings? Who controls how they are seen? The image pretends to be neutral, while quietly favoring those already advantaged. Standing behind the photographer, watching someone steel themselves for permanence, you feel the shift. Beauty is no longer only social. It is archival. Once captured, it cannot be explained away. Lighting becomes destiny. Expression becomes biography. In Victorian England, photography does not just record beauty. It judges it forever, without context, without mercy, long after the subject has stopped trying to hold still. You learn that beauty here has a strange habit of looking backward while actively harming the moment it inhabits. Even as people chase the newest standard, they speak longingly of what has already passed. Beauty becomes nostalgia almost instantly, mourned while it is still being enforced. You hear it in conversation. Women sigh about how faces used to be softer, how figures were once more graceful, how youth seemed purer in earlier years. Men reminisce about a sturdier masculinity, a clearer sense of order, a time when things simply looked right. No one can quite agree on when this perfect past existed, but everyone is certain it did. Portraits hang on walls as evidence. Sepia-toned faces stare out with composed seriousness, their stillness mistaken for dignity. People point to them and speak of elegance, ignoring the stiffness, the discomfort, the long hours spent holding breath for the sake of an image. Memory smooths away the strain and keeps the outline. You notice how quickly standards age. A silhouette praised 10 years ago is now quietly mocked. Hairstyles once considered refined become dated. Yet instead of acknowledging this churn, society frames it as decline. Beauty, they insist, is not changing, it is being lost. This creates a constant sense of urgency. You must achieve the ideal now, before it disappears. Before time, fashion, or younger faces replace it, the present becomes a narrow window that feels forever on the verge of closing. Ironically, this fixation on a better past justifies present suffering. Tight lacing is defended because women have always done it. Pain is tolerated because endurance is tradition. Harm is romanticized as authenticity. The past becomes a shield against criticism. You watch people recreate older styles with reverence, copying details without context. Corsets, gowns, grooming rituals are resurrected as symbols of refinement, stripped of the realities that made them unbearable. Nostalgia edits aggressively. Women are praised for looking timeless, which usually means looking like an idealized memory rather than a living person. Aging is criticized not because it is unattractive, but because it disrupts the illusion that time can be held still. You see how this nostalgia traps people. They chase an image that never truly existed, punishing themselves for failing to reach it. The past becomes an unreachable benchmark, always more beautiful, more proper, more worthy than now. There is humor in how selective the memory is. People celebrate the look of past eras while forgetting the illnesses, the restrictions, the quiet suffering that came with them. Beauty survives, bodies do not. You feel the tension sharpen when someone dares to enjoy the present. A woman laughs freely, a man dresses comfortably. They are accused of carelessness, of abandoning standards, of disrespecting tradition. Nostalgia polices joy. Even rebellion is framed as decay. Any attempt to loosen rules is met with warnings about losing refinement, losing order, losing everything that made the past superior. The future is treated with suspicion, the present with disappointment. You realize that nostalgia makes beauty untouchable. If standards belong to the past, they cannot be questioned by the present. Criticism becomes disrespect. Pain becomes proof of commitment. Standing in a room filled with carefully arranged reminders of what once was, you feel the weight of it, the longing, the myth, the way people cling to memory because it feels safer than uncertainty. Beauty here is never allowed to simply exist. It must reference something else, something purer, something already gone, and so the present suffers under the pressure of a past that never truly lived the way it is remembered. In Victorian England, beauty is always described as dying, even as it consumes those trying desperately to preserve it. You confront the men who benefit most from these standards, and the first thing you notice is how sincerely they claim not to see them. They insist beauty is natural, effortless, simply how things are. Their comfort depends on this belief, and they defend it with remarkable calm. These men sit easily in rooms where women are measured relentlessly. They lean back while others sit carefully. They speak freely while others choose words with caution. They are surrounded by beauty shaped specifically to please them, and yet they treat it like weather, something pleasant but not produced by human labor. When you ask what they prefer, they answer vaguely. Natural beauty, simplicity, nothing excessive. They say this while surrounded by women whose appearance requires hours of effort, discomfort, and money. The contradiction never quite registers. To notice, it would require acknowledging dependence. They praise restraint without practicing it. A woman who eats lightly is admired. A man who indulges is forgiven. A woman who ages visibly is pitied. A man who ages visibly is respected. The imbalance is so consistent it feels invisible to those benefiting from it. You watch how they respond to beauty without admitting the response exists. Their attention lingers, their tone shifts, opportunities appear, doors open. None of this is framed as reward. It is simply described as preference, as if preference itself were neutral and unshaped by power. Men discuss women's appearances freely when women are absent, not cruelly, usually, casually, as if evaluating furniture. Too much effort, not enough charm, a bit plain. The judgments are delivered without malice, which somehow makes them more entrenched. In public, these same men claim admiration for virtue over appearance. They praise intelligence, kindness, composure. Then they consistently choose those who meet the beauty standard first. Virtue, it seems, is easier to appreciate when paired with a pleasing face. You notice how often men reward beauty with protection. A beautiful woman is defended, excused, given the benefit of the doubt. An unbeautiful one is expected to manage herself. Beauty becomes armor provided selectively, then denied as a factor entirely. There is humor in how shocked some men become when standards are questioned. They react with confusion rather than guilt. Why should anyone feel pressured? Why make such a fuss? They have never had to calculate every choice against consequence, and so the pressure feels imaginary to them. Men insist they do not ask for suffering. They never demanded corsets, never required starvation, never requested silence, and yet they consistently reward the results of those things. Responsibility dissolves into abstraction. You see how this denial protects them. If beauty standards are natural, then benefiting from them requires no accountability. If women choose these behaviors freely, then men are merely observers. The system runs itself, conveniently. Some men sense the tension, but avoid examining it too closely. They joke about fashion, tease lightly about effort, compliment restraint. Humor becomes deflection. If everything is amusing, nothing is urgent. Others genuinely believe they are progressive, generous, fair. They support education. They admire independence. They just happen to marry women who fit the standard perfectly. Coincidence becomes habit. You confront one directly, gently. You describe the effort, the pain, the calculation. He listens politely, nods, then says he never noticed. He means it. His comfort has always depended on not noticing. The system teaches men that beauty is something women do, like housekeeping or hosting, a background process, necessary but unremarkable. Gratitude is optional. Awareness is unnecessary. Standing in the middle of this realization, you feel the imbalance sharpen. Beauty standards are enforced socially, but rewarded disproportionately. Men claim innocence while standing at the center of the benefit. The most unsettling part is not cruelty. It is absence. Absence of curiosity, absence of responsibility, absence of acknowledgement. In Victorian England, men do not need to create beauty standards to profit from them. They only need to enjoy the results and look away when asked how much they cost. You watch the cracks form quietly at first, the way old plaster separates from a wall long before anything actually falls. Victorian beauty does not collapse in a dramatic moment. It frays, it loosens, it begins to contradict itself under the weight of its own rules. Science arrives wearing a polite smile and muddy boots. Doctors start measuring things they were never meant to question: lungs, organs, blood flow. Someone finally notices that women faint suspiciously often and wonders, aloud, whether crushing the rib cage might be related. This is considered a radical thought, not dangerous, just impolite. Pamphlets circulate, articles appear, charts are drawn with earnest confidence. Tight lacing is examined not as a moral exercise but as a mechanical problem, and the results are inconvenient. Internal organs shift, breathing becomes shallow, digestion sulks. The female body, it turns out, was not designed to resemble an hourglass indefinitely. Naturally, there is resistance. Beauty defenders insist women have always fainted. It is delicate, it is feminine, it is practically decorative. Science, they argue, is ruining tradition. A proper woman should not know what her liver is doing. Reformers begin to gather, mostly women who are very tired. They speak about health, about movement, about the radical notion of walking without dizziness. They propose looser clothing, sensible shoes, breathing without strategy. Society reacts as though they have suggested public nudity. Dress reform movements appear, earnest and slightly awkward. New garments are introduced that allow bending, sitting, existing. They are mocked mercilessly. Caricatures show women dressed like sacks, threatening civilization itself by being comfortable. Beauty, it seems, must be painful to be trusted. Meanwhile, exhaustion does its quiet work. Women grow weary of maintaining perfection while running households, raising children, hosting guests, and pretending they are not tired. The performance becomes harder to sustain. Powder does not hide fatigue forever. Corsets do not fix everything. Industrial life accelerates the strain. Cities thicken, air darkens, work becomes relentless. The ideal of fragile beauty clashes with the reality of labor. Women are expected to look untouched by effort while surviving environments that touch everything. Men begin to notice, reluctantly, not the suffering exactly, but the inconvenience. Sick wives, weak daughters, medical bills. Suddenly health acquires value. Beauty that incapacitates starts to feel inefficient. Scientific language gives women something new: vocabulary. They begin to describe pain as damage rather than destiny. Doctors, some of them, listen, others do not. Progress is uneven and deeply irritating. Education helps. Girls read. They learn anatomy. They ask questions that cannot be easily powdered over. Why does virtue require dizziness? Why does elegance demand injury? These questions linger like drafts in grand rooms. Fashion adapts slowly, grudgingly. Corsets loosen by inches, not mercy. Silhouettes shift just enough to claim modernity while clinging to control. Beauty does not disappear. It negotiates. You notice the emotional change before the visual one. Women laugh more sharply. They sigh openly. They complain without apology. This is not rebellion yet. It is survival with commentary. The medical establishment fractures. Some doctors cling to old beliefs. Others publish alarming findings and are promptly ignored. A few women die spectacularly enough to force attention. Society pretends to be surprised. Beauty advice manuals soften their language. They begin suggesting moderation, balance, healthful appearance. The threat remains, just better dressed. There is humor in the chaos. Men panic over women wearing bloomers. Newspapers debate whether bicycling will damage morality. Doctors warn against excessive freedom. The idea that comfort could unravel society is deeply entertaining. Exhaustion becomes political. Women connect dots. They compare aches. They share stories. They realize suffering has been individualized on purpose. When pain is private, it stays manageable. Science continues its slow intrusion. X-rays arrive. The inside of the body becomes visible. Bones confess. Organs expose themselves. Corsets lose plausible deniability. The beauty ideal does not surrender gracefully. It never does. It adapts, reshapes, claims it always cared about health. History is rewritten gently, but you see the fracture clearly now. The perfect Victorian image trembles under scrutiny, not shattered, but no longer solid. The most dangerous thing that happens is not rebellion, it is understanding. And once that takes hold, beauty can never fully return to innocence. You feel the shift before anyone names it. It is not announced with trumpets or burned corsets. It arrives like a change in weather, subtle, uneven, and impossible to reverse once you notice it. Victorian beauty does not vanish. It evolves sideways, shedding some rules while inventing new ones with better lighting. The body begins to matter in different ways. Health becomes fashionable, but only the parts that look good from a distance. Strength is admired as long as it stays slim. Vitality is praised as long as it does not sweat. You are encouraged to glow, not function. The message is softer now, wrapped in optimism, but the pressure remains sharp underneath. Corsets loosen, then disappear, and immediately something else takes their place. Diets gain names. Exercise becomes respectable, then mandatory. Thinness stops pretending to be accidental and starts demanding effort. Hunger is still discipline, it just wears cleaner language. You watch beauty migrate from moral duty to personal responsibility. If you fail now, it is not because society is cruel. It is because you did not try hard enough. This is framed as progress. Magazines brighten, illustrations sharpen, faces become smoother, younger, more symmetrical. Photography helps. It freezes comparison into permanent evidence. You no longer measure yourself against neighbors alone, but against idealized strangers who never age and never breathe incorrectly. The language changes. Instead of virtue and propriety, you hear confidence and self-improvement. Beauty promises empowerment now. It offers freedom as long as you obey it precisely. The rules multiply while pretending to disappear. Women gain choices and lose rest. You can move, work, vote, speak, and still be expected to look effortless doing it. The burden does not lift, it redistributes. You are allowed ambition, but not exhaustion. Aging becomes the new enemy, quieter and more relentless than any corset. Men's standards shift too, but gently, forgivingly. They are encouraged to look healthy, successful, established. Lines on their faces are called character. On yours, they are called problems to be solved. You notice the cruelty has learned better manners. No one openly demands perfection anymore. They simply reward it. Jobs, love, attention, safety, all flow more easily toward those who fit the evolving ideal. The consequences of missing the mark remain intact. Beauty detaches from community and attaches to identity. It becomes something you are, rather than something you perform for others. This makes failure feel personal, isolated, embarrassing. There is humor in the transition. Old Victorians would faint at the idea of jogging for pleasure. Modern ideals encourage suffering voluntarily and call it wellness. The tools change, the expectation does not. You hear whispers of resistance, body acceptance, natural aging, comfort. They exist, but quietly, always competing with louder images. Even rebellion is styled attractively. What truly shifts is speed. Trends move faster than bodies can adapt. One decade praises curves, the next demands angles. The goalposts never stop walking. You chase relevance instead of morality now. You realize beauty has stopped pretending to be about goodness. It is about visibility, being seen, chosen, validated. The old moral threat becomes a social one. You will not be sinful if you fail. You will be invisible. And invisibility still hurts. The modern world congratulates itself on progress. It points to discarded corsets and dangerous powders as proof of enlightenment. It does not mention the quieter injuries: anxiety, obsession, comparison without end. You stand at the edge of this transformation, feeling both relief and unease. The cage door opens, but the landscape beyond is full of mirrors. Beauty is no longer enforced by society alone. It is enforced by reflection. And as you step forward, you understand that cruelty did not disappear with time. It learned to smile. You step back far enough that the outlines blur, and that is when it becomes obvious. None of this ever really leaves. It sheds names, changes outfits, updates the language, but the structure remains standing, like an old house renovated too many times to feel new. Victorian beauty does not die. It relocates. You recognize it in the mirror first, not the corset or the powder, but the feeling that your body is a project, never finished, always one adjustment away from being acceptable. The old rules promised moral worth. The new ones promise happiness, success, love, safety, different rewards, same leverage. You see how discipline still passes as virtue, only now it wears modern clothes. Hunger is called mindfulness. Control is called wellness. Pain is reframed as effort, and effort is praised until it becomes mandatory. The language is kinder. The expectation is not. Victorian women were warned they would fail as wives, daughters, and citizens. You are warned you will fail yourself. The threat moves inward. That is its cleverest trick. You notice how beauty remains gendered, even when equality is loudly advertised. Men age into authority. Women age into invisibility. The timeline is unforgiving, just better lit. Lines on a man's face suggest experience. On yours, they suggest negligence. Someone will ask what you did wrong. Class still dictates forgiveness. Wealth buys softness, help, time. Poverty still wears scrutiny like a spotlight. The rich are effortlessly attractive. The poor are advised to try harder. The old elegance versus vulgarity never left. It simply learned new accents. You hear echoes of Victorian advice manuals in modern headlines. Improve yourself. Fix this flaw. Avoid that mistake. Do not let yourself go. The tone is cheerful now, motivational, but the message lands the same. You are always almost enough. Beauty still organizes rooms. Who is listened to? Who is helped? Who is remembered? You watch conversations tilt toward faces that match expectation. You watch opportunity follow symmetry like a trained dog. The body remains evidence. Proof of discipline or failure. Proof of worth or carelessness. Victorians believed the body revealed the soul. Modern culture insists it reveals character. The accusation is unchanged. There is humor in how earnestly each era believes it is different. Victorians thought they were enlightened compared to their ancestors. You are encouraged to believe the same. History flatters itself generously. You think about how many women fainted quietly, how many blamed themselves. You think about how many scroll past images now and feel a similar tightening, not of ribs but of self-assessment. The sensation is familiar, even if the cause is updated. Beauty never required consent. It simply required participation. You could opt out in theory, but the cost has always been social, economic, emotional. That has not shifted. It has just become easier to deny. You notice how rebellion is allowed now, but only if it photographs well. Discomfort is acceptable when styled. Resistance must still be attractive to be taken seriously. Even refusal is curated. And yet, you also see something else. Awareness, language, memory. The ability to name what is happening instead of assuming it is natural, that matters more than eras admit. Victorian beauty thrived on silence. Modern beauty struggles under scrutiny. It survives, but it has to explain itself now. It has to pretend to care. You step back again, further, and realize that beauty has always been a negotiation between fear and hope. Fear of rejection, hope of belonging, that is the constant. What changes is how clearly you can see the strings. Once you see them, they do not disappear, but they loosen, and that, quietly, is everything. You leave Victorian England the way you leave a long conversation that started politely and ended uncomfortably honest. Nothing explodes, no rules are formally dismissed. You simply walk away carrying the weight of understanding, and it sits heavier than any corset ever did. The streets look the same as you go. Brick, fog, carriages, the low murmur of expectation humming beneath everything. Women still pass you with careful posture and practiced faces. Men still glance without admitting why. Shop windows still display improvement, correction, refinement. It all continues, uninterrupted by your realization. That is the point. Beauty standards do not need your belief to survive. They only need repetition. You see now how effortlessly they change clothes. One era dresses them in morality, another in medicine, another in empowerment. The intention never has to announce itself. It simply waits for the next acceptable language. Victorian England wanted obedience wrapped in lace. It wanted women small, pale, quiet, grateful. Modern culture wants something else on the surface: confidence, glow, authenticity. But the demand beneath it still hums the same tune. Adjust yourself, monitor yourself, be desirable without asking why. You think about how often beauty has been described as natural while requiring constant intervention. Powders, stays, diets, routines, rituals. Nature, apparently, must be aggressively corrected. Victorian women were told this was destiny. You are told it is choice. The outcome feels familiar. You notice how beauty standards always insist they are temporary. Just this style, just this look, just this decade. They promise relief is coming soon. They rarely mention that the relief never arrives, only the updates. As you step further away, you understand how beauty has always been an economy. It distributes attention, safety, forgiveness, opportunity. Those who have it are praised for virtue. Those who do not are advised to improve their attitude. Victorian England was blunt about it. Beauty secured marriage. Marriage secured survival. There was no illusion of fairness. Modern systems pretend to be gentler. They insist beauty is optional while rewarding it constantly. The contradiction is impressive. You think about the women who followed every rule and still lost. The ones who fainted, aged, fell ill, disappeared quietly. You think about the ones who broke rules and paid for it socially. The lesson was never about perfection. It was about control. What unsettles you most is how adaptable beauty is. It absorbs criticism. It rebrands. It apologizes just enough to continue. When called cruel, it promises care. When exposed as shallow, it promises depth. When accused of harm, it offers products. Victorian beauty harmed bodies openly. Modern beauty harms minds politely. Both insist the damage is unfortunate but necessary. You realize now why beauty standards feel immortal. They are not tied to time. They are tied to fear. Fear of exclusion. Fear of being overlooked. Fear of being unchosen. Those fears outlive fashion easily. You pause at the edge of this realization because it would be easy to become cynical here. But cynicism is another kind of obedience. It keeps you watching without acting. What matters is clarity. You leave knowing that beauty standards are not accidental trends or harmless preferences. They are systems with memory. They learn what works. They discard what does not. They do not vanish when criticized. They evolve. And yet, you also leave knowing they are not invincible. They rely on silence, comparison, isolation. When people share experiences, the spell weakens. When language exists, shame loosens its grip. Victorian beauty thrived because women thought their suffering was personal. Modern beauty struggles because too many recognize the pattern. You carry that with you as you step out of the era entirely. The fog thins, the corsets fade, the mirrors remain. Beauty will keep changing costumes. It will keep insisting this version is different, but you will remember what it has always wanted. And that makes all the difference.